Now is the time. A time you'll look back on. A time you adopt as inspiration. You will recollect this time. This moment, right now. Motivate yourself towards success. Overcome. Take over. The time is now.
Hello. We are back. We're back. Let's check the internet. Thumbs up. I think we're okay. We're good for now. Let's hope that stays like that. But great to be back. Great to see you, Pete. Great to see everyone in the chat as well. Before I even ask Pete how he is, I'm going to just let people know this is going to be a bit of a mixed bag show because we're saying will we, won't we? Yeah, and then we said let's go with the show, and then we kind of changed it a few times as the day went on. So anything could happen in this show. It could we could even make a signing yet before the night's out. Who knows? Not promising nothing there though. But Pete, how are you?
No, all good, Daz. Looking forward to this show. It's been a bit of like you said, it could be a bit of a mixed bag. But look, we're looking for all of your questions. Newcastle United, we can already see some coming in the chat. I know Lisa as well put a little message out in the chat saying get your questions and discussion topics in for the lads. Make sure that you do because we're going to talk all things Newcastle United.
Cool. And before, just a reminder to everyone as well, if you're new to the channel or new just watching us back, make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you're subscribed already, do nothing there. Just hit that like button. That's what we like to push it up the algorithm. But I think, Pete, while we're waiting for some guy to finish his dinner, and I don't mean Ben Jacobs, I mean Chris again, ditching us for food. But he's making excuses that he's 5-10 minutes late. So make sure to slag him off when he arrives. And Ben shall be along shortly as well. But maybe we'll just go straight into the questions, Pete, and just start picking up because there's going to be loads. Let me see. I want to start in this one from Tom Lynch straight away. My favorite news of the day. Evening, everyone. News earlier today: the Forest are interested in Wood. Chris Wood, no. How credible do you think this is? And do you think we might still need cover for him? For me, just name the day. I'll be taxi to drive Chris Wood down. Of course, for me as well, we definitely need a replacement because I don't trust going the rest of the season and the cup competition with Wilson and Isak. Just Wilson is like he could fall tomorrow, yeah, so I think we need cover. I'd only sell him if we're bringing in cover as well. But I would wish him well to Forest, and I think Forest would go for him. I think we touched on the last day. Steve Cooper's doing really well at Forest. I think they got 20 points already, halfway in the season or so, and they're still in the League Cup as well, of course. And yeah, he could do what he did for us, keep them up. So it'd be a good move from Forest. That'd be my thoughts on it. Pete, your thoughts?
My thoughts initially is that you are doing some great drama work. You're like, oh, no, don't leave Wood, don't leave. I love it.
There'll be tears if you just go, Pete. Fake laughing, but the tears are real.
Yeah. I'll be honest, and I think, I think a few people may think the same. I don't personally think he'll leave this month. I don't personally think that Eddie Howe will let him go, but if somebody comes in with a bid that's big enough, I think we will consider it. Definitely. Look, he's third choice striker now. We've got Isak, we've got Wilson. He's third choice striker. If he wants to be a main striker at another club, then if they pay enough, I think we'll let him go. And there'll be contingency there, and there'll be another option of bringing the third striker in. But I don't see it. I just don't see it. I don't see it. Like, I think Forest are the perfect team to put the money in our mouths and say, take it, we want him, because they'll pay anything for anybody at the moment with the amount of money they've already spent. They've spent more than us in the summer. So I just can't see it. I don't know. I just can't see us selling him, which is really weird to say.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Yeah, it is, because at the start of the window, I would have thought it was all indications that they were going to keep him, and even our good friend Jordan Cronin had been converted after I don't know what Chris Wood did to him out there in Saudi Arabia, Jedi mind trick or something. But yeah, he's all for keeping him now as well. But yeah, no, we'll see how it plays out. I guess you get to pick the next question, Pete.
Okay. So some of these questions we want to get. We can come back to these questions anyway, because we can get Ben to answer some of these. But I'm going to ask this one. Let's ask this one from Tom Dixon. Just popped up in the screen. Scott McTominay is reportedly open to a move to Newcastle United. The Scotland international has been linked with the move to Tyneside, despite Eddie Howe denying talks of a loan bid. He did actually deny it in his press conference. He was asked before the Fulham game, and he did deny there was any talks. But what are your thoughts, Daz? What are your thoughts about first? I know you've said it before, but the reason why I'm asking is because
changed a bit now. Maybe
it's for some reason Scott McTominay is not going away. So we've been linked with him now for at least 2 weeks, and the link still keeps lingering on, and it's still there, and different people are reported on it. So what are you thinking? I want to get your thoughts in general. I know you've already answered the question before, Daz, but I want to get your thoughts in general on Scott McTominay. But what are your thoughts also is the fact that link is not going away?
Yeah, but that link could be agents trying to drive a move. Do Man United want to sell him? The last line there from Tom, Eddie Howe denying talks. Eddie Howe would deny it. Anyway, you can't. When it comes to transfer stuff, you can't, and team selection, you can't trust Eddie. He's a pure poker face. So, but I don't want him. Where to me he'd be kind of like a really good Mike Ashley signing, to tell you the truth, but not for us now where we're going. We want something better. So I can't see him rocking up for us. No. I think we'd have to lose another midfielder, and we're down to one midfielder, and it'll be transfer deadline day. Can't get anyone else then. But that I can't even see us being that desperate. We plan ahead. Dan Ashford, how long has he had now to work on things? He's got some tricks up his sleeve, and I think it'll all come to light in the next 15 days or so. Take out the weekends out of that as well. Like it's going to be all action, and that's why we're having issues securing guys to come on the show on days, because everyone is waiting for something to pounce, and but they will come. But it's just if everyone is sitting waiting, like you are and like we are, for something to happen, and it's going to happen soon. Your thoughts, Pete, on him? Would you take him?
Would I take him? No. I think there are better options out there. We've talked about them on the transfer shows already. We've discussed a number of different defensive midfielder number 6 type positions that I think we can go and get for a decent price. However, do I think he's on Eddie Howe's list? I think he is, being honest. I think he is someone that Eddie Howe would like at Newcastle. I don't think he's at the top of the list. I don't think he's at the top of Eddie Howe's list, but I think he's on the list. And I think this is probably why this link with Scott McTominay isn't going away, and I think this is why, from my perspective, that unless we sign somebody else, he will continue to be linked because he's not playing for Man United. Casemiro is one of the best defensive midfielders, if not, for me, he's the best defensive midfielder in the world for me. That's how good he is. And when you've got someone like that, he's not going to get a sniff. So if he's offered the opportunity to come to Newcastle, there's reports that he's interested in coming to Newcastle. He's willing to come to Newcastle. Am I surprised? No, of course. Why wouldn't you want to come to Newcastle right now and play for us? But I genuinely think that Eddie Howe wants him as part of his. He's part of his wanted list, shall I say? He probably might be third or fourth on that wanted list, but I think he's on it.
Craig Lee's on it as well, by the looks of it, on that list. But okay, that's my. It's back to me. I'm picking the next question. I saw one I like to tackle as well. Where did I put it now? This one, because we talked about this a bit today in our own chat. Of the three Chelsea players, and we might bring this back up with Ben as well. We are linked with, and they are Zigic, Conor Gallagher, and Ruben Loftus-Cheek. They were the three mentioned by, I think it was Luke Edwards' article recently where I saw it anyway. But of the three, who would you prefer? Actually, I'll go to you first, Pete. Who would you prefer of the three?
Okay. I think my natural reaction is to go for Conor Gallagher because he's young. He's proven at Crystal Palace that with a good run of games, he can play at a good level. He had a fantastic season last season at Palace. However, if I'm looking at the here and now and I'm thinking, right, we want a player to come in that can do a job that can lift us and be the difference maker to get us Champions League football potentially with a bit more regular football. I can't look past Hakim Ziyech. His ability, his technical ability on the ball is so good. And you could see at the World Cup, playing regular football for his country, he is, life goals just put in there. Ziyech is so talented. He's super talented. There's a reason why he was, why Chelsea paid so much for him and why so many teams wanted him from Ajax. He's a super talented player. He can play on the left. I mean, I think he's helped set up the goal for Chelsea at the weekend off the left-hand side. And he put the ball in. For Havertz to score. But he's predominantly a right-sided, a little bit like Miggy that cuts inside. And his technical ability is so good. Like, it'd be a great signing to get him in. But, would it be a loan? Would it be a permanent? I'd question mark a permanent for Hakim Ziyech because I think he's 28, nearly 29. If he's not already 29.
29. He's 29, yeah.
So therefore, you're not going to get your resale value on, how much you're going to have to pay to prize him out of Chelsea. Chelsea are very good at getting good money for their players that they don't want. They've done it for so many years now. So, in my mind, I'm thinking the logical out of the three is, without doubt, Conor Gallagher. Ruben Loftus-Cheek, I've not talked about him. Decent player. For me, too injury prone. And I think Ruben Loftus-Cheek's about 28 himself. Like, he seems to just kind of like disappeared through his career and just not really done anything. But yet he's still at Chelsea. Like, it's just a really strange situation. I think physically his outlet is good. It would be a really good fit for Newcastle in their midfield three. But for me, in terms of what we identify ourselves with, intensity, pressing, hard work, Conor Gallagher is probably the best. What do you think, guys?
What do I think? Well, I'm going to comment on, I think it was David's question in the chat as well. Yeah, Chris is out buying fireworks, along with eating his dinner. But of the three, right? So for me, of the three, who I would pay money to buy and to bring in on a contract, on a long-term contract, would be Conor Gallagher, and that is as a squad player as well. I think Eddie Howe could get the best out of him. I thought he was very good when he's at Palace, as you mentioned, and he got to go to the World Cup as well, even though you didn't see him or anything. But no, I think he's a good player, a good squad player for us going forward. Zilic, he's 29. He's a very good player. He did well at the World Cup as well. For him, I think, and Chris did mention him as a loan. He'd be a great loan signing for Newcastle. Because of the age, I don't know if I'd bring him in, but he's a very good player. So I wouldn't be disappointed if we did bring him in. Ruben Loftus-Cheek, no, not for me. The ship sailed him about 5 years ago because we were always on about him, maybe bringing him in, and it was kind of in the back of the Mike Ashley days as a loan or anything. But no, he's too. He could have and should have moved from Chelsea if he was interested in furthering his career and being a regular somewhere. He's been happy to sit it out at Chelsea, so no, not for me. I'd leave him where he is. So definitely Conor Gallagher first, then Zilic, and then no, after that, forget it. That's where I am there.
Definitely. There's a few people come in. The Dugan family said Loftus-Cheek, in my opinion, very overrated. Longstaff is better than him, in my opinion. Interesting. Yeah, definitely. Captain Kifar has said Ruben Loftus-Cheek would be another Sissoko, in my opinion. Fair point. Could well be the same. So interesting. But I just wanted to give a shout out. Tony Beasley, first time listening live. Great to have you on. He normally catches up on the next day. Hopefully we can get a player or two, as Pete must be sick of me moaning on Twitter. Never sick of you moaning on Twitter, Tony, at all. Get your questions in for us and we'll answer it. Brilliant stuff.
Nice one, and welcome, Tony. Welcome live. And you're not alone with joining us live. Someone else has just jumped into our chat there as well in the green room. We'll bring him on, Pete.
Go for it.
Let's bring him on. Here is Ben Jacobs. Welcome, Ben.
Hey.
Good evening. How are you?
How's it going? Not too bad. Not too bad, Ben. And we've another struggler as well coming to join us. So we better bring him on. He's just after finishing his dinner. For the third time he's ditched us for his dinner. It's Chris Hall. Welcome, Chris Hall.
Hey,
Ben, boys, how we doing?
We're good, Chris. Ben, you won't know this, but for the last 3 shows, Chris is basically discarded us for food. So every time we've had a show, he's gone, you know what, I'm going out for a meal instead. So we thought we'd just remind you of that as he joined us, but great to have you on.
Good to see you, Ben. You okay, mate?
Yeah, great to see you. And a belated, if we're allowed to still say it, Happy New Year to everybody too.
Definitely.
Happy New Year, Ben. Nice.
Absolutely.
Where should we start, guys? Where should we start? Will we start on Newcastle? Will we start on Leicester? Where do we go first?
And Ben, let's get your thoughts on just very briefly before we get on to lots of other talk. There's been so many questions already coming to the chat about various different things, but just on the semi-final, Ben, you know, I assume that you watched the semi-final, Newcastle against Leicester. What were your thoughts with regards to, you know, the game and how it panned out, and obviously from your perspective, the Leicester performance? Was it a concern for you?
Well, first of all, I wish it was a semi-final. It was unfortunately only a quarter-final for Leicester, and it went no further than that. But we turned up against a very good Newcastle side with a backstory from the Premier League where Leicester were dismantled inside the first half an hour. And unfortunately, from Leicester's point of view, they were passive, they were careless with the ball, and Newcastle found a way to find, in the end, that clinical touch of quality. I think that from Leicester's point of view, they had one big chance in the game to Jamie Vardy at 2-0, which might have set up a grandstand finish. And that sums Leicester up at the moment. They're not scoring goals. The players that were very effective maybe a few seasons ago are not now as clinical, and they lack that bit of confidence. And Leicester without James Madison are a totally different side, unfortunately. But you have to look at Newcastle in that game and the atmosphere created by St James's Park. And it was clear from the first whistle that it was a massive game for Newcastle United. Had you said at the beginning of the season that a cup run would occur before we realised that Newcastle were going to be challenging for Champions League football, then fans would have been delighted by that, because ultimately it's been a long wait for a trophy, a major one anyway. But when you look at the context of the season now and the league being the priority, some might have wondered how not seriously Eddie Howe would have treated the quarter-final, but generally how he approached that week. And obviously going out of the FA Cup was wholesale changes with a view to making sure that they went on a run in the League Cup, and now it's high priority and they've got a very good chance of getting to Wembley Stadium in that semi-final. So I think the manner in which Newcastle dismantled Leicester in the league and in the cup, how clinical they were, and also how team-orientated the goals were, really impressive. And that's what I've loved about Newcastle this season. Generally, that defensively resilience. Sven Botman has been a revelation. Miguel Almiron is scoring the goals. Everybody else is chipping in. And it's often not only the goal and the person that finishes it. I know that Almiron has got some spectacular efforts that he's put in the back of the net. But for me, sometimes it's the speed of thought. It's the speed of movement. It's the unsung hero in the move. It's the quality of pass that leads to the finish. And each time, when that different aspect contributes to a Newcastle goal, it's a different player as well at times. And that's depth, that's quality, and that's momentum. And this is why things are going from good to amazing and maybe even to fairy tale territory from Newcastle's perspective.
Lads, we've got some breaking news. So I'm gonna interrupt 1 second because we've only got these guys for a very, very short time. Let's get them on. Welcome, guys, as well. Dom,
evening, lads.
Jordan.
Hi, Jordan. Hi.
Cheers to the invite, lads. Thank you. Appreciate it, lads.
We're trying to lose you. We're trying to ditch you.
What a friend. Now, Jordan and Dom, you're at the FA Cup, the FA Youth Cup, currently half time. Look, how's it going at the moment? How are Newcastle playing? I know they're playing against Arsenal.
Yeah, it's not been great. I mean, the 2 goals are conceded have sloppy goals, it has to be said. One deflected in just before half time, sent the keeper the wrong way, and the opening goal was just a scramble on the line. I mean, Newcastle really had to clear the lines there. Unfortunately didn't, but the goal they scored was probably the one moment of quality we've seen all game. Lewis Miley, who's obviously been in and around the first team in terms of training, came in. I mean, he cuts in from the left-hand side, good strength, good pace, and a great finish with his right foot into the right corner of the goal. So, yeah, he's probably been the bright spark so far, as you would expect, given his sort of pedigree and reputation as an under-18s player who's pushing towards that sort of getting involved with the first team a bit more. But, yeah, Newcastle's still in the game. They'll just be disappointed that they're trailing, given the nature of the goals they've conceded.
Definitely. Well, look, we'll keep an eye on that going into the second half. Hopefully, Newcastle can turn that one around. But look, I just wanted to ask you, whilst we've got you for a short period, obviously during the half-time break, you put something out today with regards to Bruno Guimaraes. There's been obviously lots of concern with regards to his injury against Fulham. But you, like yourself and others, have reported that it's positive news. With regards to his scan, you know, what do you know? You know, what have you found out, sort of from your perspective? You know, could we potentially have him back next week at Southampton, or is that just kind of wishful thinking?
I think that's wishful thinking, given how Eddie Howe tends to approach things. He'll want Bruno back in training ideally before he plays him in the game. So you never know. I think it would be asking a lot though. Given the situation, but I thought it was interesting the tweet Bruno put out today saying he'll be back faster than ever, which is interesting. But the scan fortunately revealed no sort of ligament damage. So if he had that would have been months out. So we're looking at a sprain or a twisted ankle, if you like, and that's a number of weeks, if not sooner. So I think the second leg for Southampton is realistic, if not the West Ham game at the start of February. But if Eddie Howe can get Bruno back in training next week, even if it's just for one day ahead of the Southampton game, then potentially could be involved. But I like I say, I think that's wishful thinking at this stage. But we'll speak to Eddie Howe later in the week and see what the situation is then, because things like this could develop quite quickly, and the positive news could become more positive as well. It can go the other way as well. But hopefully we'll see Bruno back in action sooner rather than later.
Definitely.
Cool.
Definitely. Yeah, fingers crossed, because I think we're all worried after that. I don't know if you boys, have you got any questions for Dom before we let him go? Anything you want to ask in particular?
You see.
So lads, I won't be offended.
No.
You know what, Dom? Can I jump in, Dom? I want to ask you: Is there anything in this news that we've been linked with those 3 Chelsea players, or do you think that's just people putting 2 and 2 together? Given the fact that Chelsea are signing everyone at the moment, and they're probably going to be looking to get rid of people, does that necessarily mean that we're going to be interested? Do you think, obviously, I think it was Amanda and Meerdad were spotted, weren't they, with the Chelsea with the Chelsea owner at some point?
Yeah.
Do you think there's anything in that, or?
I think there could be. I'll admit, I'll hold my hands up. I haven't heard anything other than Newcastle have inquired about these players previously, and it would make a lot of sense. It does sound like just adding 2 and 2 together, as far as I'm concerned anyway. But I think it's one of them where Chelsea need to get rid of players. I mean, I think they need to trim the Champions League squad by 2 players who non-English players. So Ziyech would be one of them. So that's one I think could happen. But based on what Graham Potter said, he's a big fan of the likes of Ruben Loftus-Cheek and Conor Gallagher. So I think it's tricky, but given how you're right in what you say, where given how many players Chelsea have signed this month, and if they go out and sign a couple more, then that squad, the 25-man squad, becomes far too inflated, and they'll simply need to get players out. So if it's players who aren't starting games regularly, then Newcastle could potentially look to make a move. One thing I can't see happening though is a loan move for these players. Just my opinion, I can't see Chelsea willing to loan a player out to a team who are now direct rivals to them for a Champions League spot. And if it's wishful thinking now for Chelsea to get in a Champions League spot, but if they were to push up the table, they wouldn't want to help Newcastle beat them too.
Are we really? I think we're well ahead of them now. At this stage, we're 10 points clear of Chelsea. They could close the gap if we falter, but 10 points is looking good so far. I'd say we're not direct rivals for Chelsea this season.
Yeah, I guess not.
Definitely. Look, Dom, I know you've jumped on during half time, so I'll let you go and have your break before the second half reappears. But massive thanks for you for jumping on sort of a short notice. Really appreciate it. And fingers crossed the young players, the under-18s, get the win.
Spot on, lads. Catch you later.
Thanks, Dom. Cheers,
Yeah, mate.
Brilliant stuff to having Dom on. It is half time in the game in the FA Youth Cup. But Chris, you had a great question that you gave to Dom that I think it's only right that we ask the same question to Ben. Ben might have a different perspective on it. This is why we love getting different people on the show. So those 3 players, Chris, ask away.
I thought the way you were approaching that, Pete, was you're going to say, like from a Leicester angle. So maybe we could ask about Tielemans and Madison. That's where I thought you were going.
Well, Chris, you know me so well. But the Chelsea players, look, Ben, you've heard the reports. We talked about it last summer about those similar players. And it's cropped up again in January. Is there a genuine link there from what you know with the likes of Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Conor Gallagher, Hakim Ziyech? Is there a genuine link there, and are Newcastle potentially a team that could take any one of those players?
Well, I think the first thing to point out here, which was alluded to, is that the Newcastle ownership have a very strong relationship with Chelsea's American-led consortium, because the majority owner at Chelsea, Clearlake Capital, does business with PIF, and therefore they speak regularly. It doesn't mean that any preferential deals are going to be done, but there is a easy route of access which could potentially lead to some business. However, there's challenges with each of the players that have been mentioned. So Hakim Ziyech, first and foremost, definitely available on the market and would like a move, and his ideal destination is Ajax, but they've already said that they don't plan on moving for him. And Milan were the team over the summer that perhaps got the closest to signing Ziyech, and they moved in another direction as well. So Newcastle certainly have admiration for Ziyech, but you've got a post-World Cup hike in the price, and the big stumbling block is wages. So if Newcastle signs Ziyech, then either he has to cut his wages or Newcastle will be going against their model, which is very dangerous when you sign a player on a Champions League wage for two reasons. First of all, if they don't make Champions League, you're saddled with it. And second of all, how does the rest of the dressing room react if somebody comes in mid-season and is earning, I don't want to say considerably more, but is one of the top earners at the club? And that's the challenge, really, that Newcastle have always been. And it might be the one thing, like him or loathe him, that Mike Ashley policed well. The fact that there's no real player within reason at Newcastle United that is on an undue wage. And that is essential under financial fair play, but it's also very key for team morale. So getting in Ziyech is all about wages. They're sky high, and that's what's putting off a lot of suitors. And I would be surprised if Newcastle made a move for Hakim Ziyech unless they found a way to get the wages down. The fee, I think, will be a bit more negotiable because Chelsea do want to have a bit of a clean out. With Conor Gallagher, it's Newcastle and Crystal Palace, and it's a much simpler deal to potentially pull off. And even though Chelsea are a little bit short in midfield in terms of the quality, I do think that Gallagher is genuinely surplus to requirements either now or over the summer. And the fee is something around 40 million, which is quite a high amount to pay. And that's where perhaps Newcastle will be put off, or maybe they'll try and get Yuri Tielemans for a lot cheaper than that. But Gallagher played very well in the last game for Chelsea, and he started that match. So it's a balance, really, because Graham Potter may want to hang on to him. And then with Loftus-Cheek, he has actually been an important player for Graham Potter this season in terms of somebody that can be used within a squad and a rotation. So we have to again wait and see whether Potter intervenes here. Leicester, another club that have been linked with Loftus-Cheek in the past. My understanding is there's not too much to that. But once again, we have to be very careful at this stage of the window because Leicester may not have a target, may lose a player, and then may have a target. So there's a merry-go-round at this stage of the window that not every fan appreciates. So I think of the three that you mentioned, we have to talk about Christian Pulisic as well, who will not be sold in January and is injured now until February, but he's been a Newcastle target. They preferred to have a loan with an option to buy, and Todd Boehly wasn't willing at that point, but he's been on the radar as well. So you've got four players actually that Newcastle have expressed an interest in, and we still need to really wait and see what the direction of travel is. I think that Gallagher is a very serious target of all of the ones that have been mentioned, and there might be some value in the Ruben Loftus-Cheek situation, but it depends upon how Graham Potter reads that and if he wants to, at this stage, get rid of more than one. Because if this was regular Chelsea in better form and without a ridiculous queue of injuries, then 2 or 3 could have gone in January for sure. But because of the injuries, because of the period of transition, it's not going to surprise me at all if they wait their outgoings to be more summer-led and try and get through this injury crisis with what they've got. And therefore, Newcastle might have to be a little bit more patient. But Gallagher's the one that I'm the most intrigued by, because on the one hand, he played in the last game against Palace and he was relatively influential, but he's been streaky in form. And you sense that as they revamp the midfield and start bringing in new targets and versatile players that maybe can drop into midfield, maybe can go out wide, maybe can play in attacking midfield and even up to a number 10 or a false number 9. At that point, Gallagher might be the player that gets boxed out. And Crystal Palace would have taken him either on loan or in a permanent deal last summer, but there was just no kind of give from Chelsea to allow that to get done. So let's see whether Newcastle muscle in. But I think if they want Gallagher, then you're looking at somewhere in the region of 35 or 40 million.
Interesting. We'll have to keep an eye on that and see how things unfold. I mean, Chelsea just spent a lot of money, so we'll see if they need to offload one or two players. I think there's a question, Chris, that you wanted to come to that you'd seen in the chat.
Yes,
throw that one up.
I look at the starred ones. We've got loads of starred ones. It was from our lovely. It was from our lovely Lisa Mole, and Lisa asks, "Who would you be happy with us offloading in this window?" And the reason I wanted to direct that at Ben is obviously, as you'll be aware, and you'll realise, Ben, there's still quite a big squad upheaval to happen. But given that we're in the January period, and normally those kind of big squad upheavals would probably happen in the summer at the end of the season. Which ones do you think are probably realistic in terms of Eddie Howe moving on? I mean, we've heard rumours today about Chris Wood being available. We know that Ryan Fraser's available. Matt Ritchie, I think, has been available since the new owners came through the door. It's just which ones do you think? There's a possibility of them being moved on this window, if any.
Yeah, I think you've outlined it neatly, and that's been the challenge for Newcastle, really, offloading players. And Eddie Howe says, as you would expect a manager when a player's still contracted to Newcastle United, that he's not in any desperate rush to get rid of players. But it's obvious that if they can offload a few that are surplus to requirements now, then they start to clear a little bit of space, which will allow them to move more aggressively in the summer transfer window. And I think this is the one area, really, even under PIF and definitely before PIF as well, where Newcastle have traditionally struggled both to get rid of players that they want out more imminently and then actually sell players for a profit. I think back to Jose Perez to Leicester in 2019, which was 30 million. And I can't think of many examples where they've got rid of a player and for a decent profit since then. So when we look at outgoings, they become a necessity and almost cutting your losses rather than necessarily financially benefiting. And that is where, I guess, somebody like Alan St. Maximin, if he is to go at some point in 2023, might present them with an opportunity to bring in a little bit of money. But when we sort of look beyond that, we know that there's technically one outgoing in Garen Cal, who's gone to Hearts, having only just come in, and that's a great loan. And it's a good example for him to get game time at an excellent club with a strong fan base like Hearts. And then beyond that, I think that Newcastle's focus will be to try and resolve the situations of Ryan Fraser and Carl Darlow. I think that with Dubravsky, they might be okay with him just coming back. I know that some people have linked him with Leicester, and maybe there'll be some movement late within the window, but it's kind of challenging because of the two club rules. So you'd almost now have to pre-agree something going forwards, because he's played for Newcastle, he's played for Manchester United. So therefore he becomes a Newcastle United player in the short term. But I think that people will be looking at him with a view to the summer. And then with Ryan Fraser and with Carl Darlow, they definitely would like to be able to do something. And Fraser, I think in particular, is a very sellable asset. And know that he was open, if not pushing for a move during the summer. So that's one, with him only being 28 as well, that I think could definitely get done. We know that Bournemouth are one of the clubs that have been tracking him, and Nathan Jones at Southampton is another fan as well. So maybe they'll be able to get something done on that one sooner rather than later. With Darlow, he's one of far too many goalkeepers on the books now at St James's Park, especially with Dubravka returning from that Manchester United loan. So he's free to leave as well. But as I understand it, there just hasn't been a great deal of offers. And a goalkeeper like that has got a big decision to make at this stage of the season, because does he want to go to one club where he knows he's the number two, so he's up the pecking order, but he's still not getting any game time? Or does he want to drop down and have a final few years of his career playing regularly? And until the player determines that, he can't really weigh up the offers that are available. So we know at one extreme, for example, because it's good value, it's relatively low risk to anybody coming in for Darlow, you got Brentford who are looking, but he doesn't go there and get a particularly high amount of game time. And then I'm told that Charlton are another club that are taking a look at him. And that's obviously a little bit more of a step down. So I think it's a consideration about how hungry he is, because there's no point sticking around at Newcastle at this point. He's not going to get any game time. There's far too many goalkeepers. And as I said before, and I think people were quite surprised when I said it, but Dubravka returning was not about coming back to go somewhere. It was coming back because he knows how highly Eddie Howe rates him. And even with Nick Pope, I think if he hadn't gone to Manchester United, both of them would have competed. And now in hindsight, of course, we can say that Pope would have assumed the number one, but Eddie Howe always wanted Dubravka to stay. So getting him back is a blessing. It's like having a bit of cover, a bit of depth, a new signing, but it obviously means that Darlow has to go. And then we also have to consider Loris Karius as well, who I think will end up staying at Newcastle, but it's not the ideal situation for him either. He came in on a short-term deal to cover for Darlow, and if Darlow leaves, then logically Karius will stay. But how happy is Karius now about the fact that Dubravka's come back into the football club? So basically, there's just too many goalkeepers. And I sense, even with the Brentford interest, that Darlow will probably end up in the Championship, because that's where there's a large amount of interest alongside the various suitors at different levels that I've mentioned. We should add Huddersfield Town into the mix as well. And they're looking for a goalkeeper as well. And I think that that would be the kind of challenge that he might relish. But it's all about Darlow at this point, and whether he wants to leave and get first team football or leave and be part of a squad. But from Newcastle's perspective, I think they know that they can get rid of him, and that's not going to be a challenge. Whereas with Fraser, it's about trying to get some kind of value out of that deal, because he's a little bit younger and there's a few Premier League clubs rather than just one that are seriously looking at him.
The three I heard for Darlow were Hull, Stoke, and Huddersfield, where so it's the Championship kind of.
That's the thing. In what Ben's alluded to is absolutely right. Is that with Carl Darlow, he's on such a big contract still at Newcastle that we want him off the wage bill. We want him gone because he's still committed to Newcastle for so long. But it's whether he wants to take that jump and play Championship football. Because let's face it, lads, it wasn't long ago that there were people touting him for England when Dubravka was injured and he was having a good spell at Newcastle. And does that stick in his mind? Does that keep in his mind that at one point they were considering him for England, and then the next minute he's been farmed out to the Championship? Like, there are some players that can transition in that and be okay with it. There are some players that keep that in mind and think, no, this is where my level is, and will be really stubborn. So it all depends on what Darlow wants. But great opinions there from yourself, Ben. That I'm just looking at the comments coming in; they're flying in.
Some of them are crazy. They're funny. I just want to laugh at it as well. Sorry.
A lot of them are raising a lot of the same questions. Boys, I don't know if you want to flag some up. There's definitely some that I want to discuss.
First one I want to go for is from PDK, and it's Chris. Was that you that had the woman in the headlock at the Everton game? That was.
No, do you know what? I've applied to PDK and I said absolutely not, because he should know I'm a gentleman. I wouldn't do that.
There you go. So, you heard it here first.
But no, it did make me laugh. I did enjoy that. I did enjoy it, yeah.
There's another question. I'll throw it out to you. Chantal Keane mentions, what about Neves from Wolves? So Friday night, there was some reports that came out late in the evening saying that Neves was on the list and there was a player of consideration for Newcastle United. So, from your perspective, Ben, what have you heard with regards to Ruben Neves?
Well, it's a tricky one now because Wolves are doing a lot better, and Julian Lopetegui's come in and obviously wants to stamp his authority, has had an immediate impact, and Wolves are moving in the right direction. And what we saw over the summer when the Arsenal interest came in, but not just with Neves, with Moutinho as well, and some relatively concrete links with Barcelona and a few other top European clubs as well. And Wolves stayed very firm and chose to keep their squad together. So a mid-season sale for a player like Neves this late in the window feels entirely unthinkable. He's their captain. He's playing better. He's enjoying life under his new manager. So I would be surprised personally if there was any ability to get Neves now in January. And then it comes down to the summer again, and a lot will depend upon where Wolves are. Remember, they were looking like in the back end of last season and also in the first half of this season, terrible team on the decline. But in the first half of last season, and who knows, in the second half of this season, we might see them back to challenging as if they're in the mix in terms of their form, not necessarily their league position, clearly for Champions League football. And that will impact on things as well. So you've got Liverpool in the mix, who obviously would like to strengthen in that position. You've got Newcastle, who absolutely like the player, but I think they realise he's not gettable in the short term. And then still, are Arsenal going to come back in or turn to another target? It looks like Arsenal are going to prioritise in midfield Declan Rice and battle with Chelsea for his signature. So I think that this is the type of signing that we should look at Newcastle planning for and not planning for. And by that, I mean, they're in a strange strategic position right now because you've got a window plan always. And if Newcastle are thinking ahead to this window, next window, the window after, they have to be ambitious and start building towards a Champions League style target in terms of the quality of player, in terms of maybe the fee, definitely the wages and the package. So they're suddenly in the planning aspect of a transfer alongside a Liverpool, a Manchester City, and so on. But they might not get Champions League football, and then they'll have to pivot to a different target. So I think that we're going to see some very strange dual approaches from Newcastle almost, whereby they will look to strengthen for value and for youth and maybe some players that are lesser known in order to stick to their principles that have got them this far. And then these marquee signings that everyone wrongly painted Newcastle as signing when the ownership group first came in will be the ones that they pull the trigger on if they get Champions League football, because then the budgets change, they get a bit more leeway, and they're going to need to strengthen. And I think Neves falls into that category. Were Newcastle to go for a player like that now, it's difficult because he knows that his next step from Wolves is probably going to have European football and also come rewarded with a Champions League style wage and a long-term contract. And Newcastle won't be wanting to dish any of that out mid-season. So I think sometimes these stories materialise because Newcastle are already in the planning stage for the best case scenario, but they're also in the planning stage for the worst case scenario because that is the awkward but exciting position that they're in. And what complicates the January window is if one club chooses to move early, then every other club in that race has to react and decide if they're in the race or not in the race. And we're going to see that with Marcus Thuram, for example, who isn't a Newcastle target, but Manchester United are looking for the summer and other clubs too. But Chelsea are trying to escalate the situation now and get a small fee agreed because he's due to leave on a free transfer and convince the player to move mid-season. And same with Tielemans as well. Free transfer at the end of the season. And obviously somebody like Newcastle could come in now and bid and change that narrative. And then everybody else that was hoping that they could get him on a free has to decide if they stick or twist, if they bid earlier than anticipated or not. And I think that Newcastle have stuck very well to their principles. They have made sure that they've not been sucked in to an overinflated market because of who their majority owner is. And a lot of that, not in terms of how sensible they are with their business, but the scale at which they're doing business is going to change in the summer if they get Champions League football. And a club that is forward planning can't wait on the recruitment side to see if they do or don't get Champions League football. They have to plan for an eventuality where they might be in the race for, say, a Neves and start doing the legwork. Otherwise, they won't win that race. And then obviously they won't move on some of these targets if they don't have the Champions League windfall, the budget, the need to strengthen and so on. So it's quite an interesting position that Newcastle are in because they really do have to now put a strategy in place as if they're going to complete this fairy tale season. But if they don't, then don't be at all surprised if the summer window that's coming up this year is actually relatively modest.
I want to just look. I wasn't going to come to this early, guys, but we'll bring up because a few people have mentioned. We're winding up, and we'll bring it to the chat because it was a conversation anyway. You touched on Ruben Neves and you made some really, really great points with regards to Ruben Neves and the possibility of signing him. You talked about Youri Tielemans as a potential option. You know, we haven't jumped to that already. We're being quite reserved in terms of our businesses in the January window. But what is your genuine thoughts on Youri Tielemans potentially leaving in this window? And in your opinion, Ben, you know, Brendan Rodgers already talked about the fact that he's said, you know, anyone that's not committed to Leicester can go in this window. If that was the case, how much do you think could potentially prize him away from Leicester City?
That's the question, really, isn't it? And also Brendan Rodgers versus his board might be another scenario, as we saw when Wesley Fofana joined Chelsea. So Rodgers' take categorically is he doesn't want Tielemans to go. And the reason for that is because Leicester are restricted in the market. And from Rodgers' point of view, if he loses the player on a free, but he leads Leicester to safety, then that is more valuable than cashing in on a reasonably modest fee. The board may have other ideas. If an offer comes in and is 15 million, which is half what Leicester wanted, give or take, in the summer, but is still quite a lot of money for a player that's going to be a free transfer come summer, the board may turn around to Brendan Rodgers and say, we think that this offer should be accepted. But right now, nobody's bid for Tielemans. So tactically, what you would do, if you think there's buy-in from the player and you can get him on a free, and you're not that desperate about the now, and Arsenal certainly fall into this category, you might wait until the last days of the window and then say, what about 8 million? And see what's said. And if the answer is no, you say to the player, we'll be back for you when you're a free transfer. But Newcastle, I think, are in a difficult position if they choose to move on Tielemans, because he still would ideally like Arsenal. The guarantees that were there from Arsenal are gone now, because if they move for him, they would prefer to do so in the summer. And if they win the Premier League and get Champions League, who knows, their targets may change in that area. So Tielemans a year ago was very likely to move to Arsenal. And now Arsenal might try and line up Tielemans, but is he going to be tempted if somebody comes in with a definitive offer and really makes a pitch to him that he can be integral, get game time, and from Newcastle's perspective, potentially Champions League football as well? But a lot's going to come down to Leicester in this deal, because as we saw with Fofana, he forced his way out the club, whereas Youri Tielemans not only kept on playing, but then coming into this season has been captain for Leicester in certain games as well. And he's playing with a smile. He scored brilliant goals against Wolves and Everton, nearly scored a wonder goal against Manchester City as well. So don't be surprised if Brendan Rodgers sticks to his guns here and says, listen, I allowed the board to sell Fofana because that was in excess of £65 million. But with Youri Tielemans, why are we getting rid of a player for 6, 7, 8, even 15 million when it's going to be far more valuable to us to have that quality and stay up? So I would have thought that Leicester's approach will very much be to keep Tielemans, and we wait and see whether very late in the window now anyone tries their luck. I think it's sensible to bide time if Newcastle move for Tielemans, because like I said before, you're not going to get the deal you want from Leicester unless you force it on them late in the window. And then it's up to the board with limited time whether they let him go or decline it. But Brendan Rodgers is very clear. Doesn't want to lose Tielemans, doesn't want to lose Madison. Said he didn't want to lose Fofana, though. So you always have to take a manager with a pinch of salt, in the same way that Eddie Howe says he doesn't mind if he keeps hold of these players. But behind closed doors, he's definitely saying to his recruitment team, get 3 or 4 out of my squad. And this is clever management, because imagine if Eddie Howe comes out and says X, Y, and Z can leave. Then if they don't leave, it creates a dressing room full of friction and fractions to some extent. So it's smart management to defend what you've got and to stick with what you've got. But from Leicester, the thing to understand is that they don't have freedom in the market. So the longer the window ticks on, the more a financial offer that's made to them might tempt the board, but also the more pushback there'll be from Brendan Rodgers, because he won't have any time to replace Tielemans. And if Leicester don't bring in a Tielemans replacement, let Tielemans go, Madison's injured at the moment. Vardy's not looking particularly confident in front of goal. Daniel Amati is not particularly solid and comfortable at centre-back. And Danny Ward is nowhere near Kasper Schmeichel at his peak. Suddenly, they start to worry with Wolves improving, with Southampton even picking up some points recently as well, and with Nottingham Forest getting a bit more momentum and chemistry. And Danilo, what a signing that is for a club like Nottingham Forest too. So suddenly the bad sides in terms of moving in the wrong direction is basically Leicester for sure, Bournemouth as well, and definitely 100% at the moment West Ham United as well. And that means that over time, if the other teams improve, those will be the three that go down. So I think that Leicester are very worried, unfortunately, because Wolves could go on a flurry and be well clear within the next 10 games. Southampton, I still think, are hit and miss because their squad's not that deep. But Nathan Jones has found a way after he got that cup victory against Liverpool, followed it up with a league victory. Things are looking a whole lot brighter at the moment. And then the thing about West Ham, unlike Leicester, is, yeah, they're dreadful at the moment. But eventually, if this continues, and sooner rather than later, same for Everton as well. They're the other team, obviously, on the decline too. Those two managers will go. And with West Ham in particular, if somebody inherits that West Ham squad midway through the season, easy to turn that around because, you know, Leicester have got an aging Vardy. They've got Perez, who's very streaky and doesn't score that many goals, even though he contributes in other areas. They've got an old player like Brighton, who's a bit inconsistent with his delivery, but works hard. They've got a shaky defense. Look at West Ham. They've got Mikel Antonio. They've got Scamacca. They've got Paqueta. They've got all kinds of goals and creativity, but for whatever reason, it's not coming together. But they are, quality-wise and on paper, even though the table doesn't reflect it, too good to go down. So you start thinking, yikes, if you're Everton, yikes, if you're Leicester, maybe to some extent still some panic if you're at Southampton, and big, big trouble if you're West Ham and maybe Leeds. And 3 of those 5 are going down at the moment, and Forest and Wolves will be clear. So if Leicester think Tielemans is the difference maker to pick up their form, which was very good leading into the World Cup, they'll be adamant that he has to stay. And this, I think, is why it might still be quite difficult for Newcastle to get a deal done in January.
Interesting. It's interesting because you see the reports that are out there all the time, and it's that 1 week you're saying we're hearing reports that it's close, that we're likely to put a bid in, that it could be a deal that gets done, and then all of a sudden it kind of disappears and fades into the back, and you don't quite know where it's at. So from your perspective, it's great to hear on that, you know, with regards to Tielemans and signing players of the like. But Daz, I think you've got a different type of question.
Yeah, it's a different type of question, and it's just really based on some of your tweets today, Ben. And it's all about, like, of course, we're still living and celebrating the Newcastle takeover, but there's a lot of talk with Man United being up for sale or investment coming in, and Sir Jim Radcliffe is kind of showing his hand. Of course, he's a Man United fan. He did try to he took a bid in pretty late in for Chelsea, but so there's that aspect, and then there's the Liverpool looking for investment or looking to sell, and there's talk of the owners of is it PSG looking to invest maybe in someone like Tottenham as well. So I suppose, what do you think will happen first? Who will get their investment / sell their club first? Where do you see it going?
Well, I don't need to tell a bunch of Newcastle fans that takeovers take time, and these are complex.
Imminent.
Yes, imminent, but in a month sense, not a days or hours sense. So I think Manchester United is the most rigid and locked in process. That's the first thing to say. And there's a full expectation that there will be a suitor in or very, very close, imminent, by April or May of this year, which will mean that takeover has moved relatively fast within 6, 7, 8 months. Not quite as quick as Chelsea, but that was atypical, and there was an urgency to sell the football club because Roman Abramovich was forced out due to the war in Ukraine. But with Manchester United, it's the Rain Group. They did the Chelsea sale. They are aware of market interest from that Chelsea sale, and the Glazers have leaned more towards that full sale rather than minority investment. So providing they don't get a strong minority investment offer. And as part of due diligence, both options will be shortlisted, but assuming the Glazers get the price they want, they'll sell. And unlike Chelsea, there's no government involvement and there's no necessity for the Glazers to sort of put out a tender to prospective bidders around the running and the protection of the club. If somebody comes in with the highest offer, the Glazers could just say, thank you very much, we'll take the money, and not have that scrutiny prior to it going to the Premier League and the fan base. Ultimately, it may be about the finances. But of course, it is still quite a rigid process. So as part of the current state, you have to express an interest. When you express an interest, you then get a series of paperwork back. You sign a privacy agreement or an NDA, and then you get an aspect of what is broadly speaking known as due diligence. And due diligence works two ways. On the one hand, you get the paperwork and the financials necessary to come to a fair valuation. And on the other hand, you can ask a series of questions. But it's non-exclusive and it's not as in-depth as it might be further along in the process. Still, though, pretty thorough. Then, of course, you make a bid. Then, based upon that bid, there is likely to be a shortlist of 3 or 4 put to the Glazers. And then from there, they may choose to engage with multiple parties, or they may decide from that shortlist to pick a preferred bidder sooner rather than later. And then that preferred bidder would enter into, if it pans out like a traditional takeover, a period of exclusivity to complete the deal. And it would all move relatively fast. And the feeling with the Glazers is that although they say publicly they want 7-8 billion, the sale price might be at a low end, and I mean pretty low, 4.5 billion, and at a higher end, 5.5 to 6.5 billion. So we wait and see. And obviously, the more suitors and the higher they value the football club, the more likely the Glazers are to get the price they want, which is why the hope is from their perspective that they will be able to facilitate a sale. But there's a lot out there, including Sir Jim Ratcliffe today saying that he's entering into the process that is premature. And as I've said many times, and dare I bring up the group, Bin Zayed Group and Newcastle United, those that shout loudest and earliest are usually the least credible of the lot. And those that are quieter and secretive are usually the ones that are serious at this stage. It's different once there's a shortlist. It's different once fan engagement is a necessity. It's different once you're in a period of exclusivity so you can control the narrative. But when Jim Ratcliffe says he's entering the Manchester United process, he means exactly that at this point, there is still a deadline to enter. There is still time for initial scouting, building of consortiums and due diligence. It's only really in February that we're going to see tangible offers, at which point we'll know who's legitimate and who's serious and who meets the valuation and who doesn't. So there's reports out there, for example, with Manchester United, that there's already been bids placed, and it's nonsense because you cannot place a bid for any football club, not in a formal sense anyway, without doing the due diligence first. Otherwise, you're just swinging in the dark. And that's the difference between player transfers. If you want Kylian Mbappe, you've seen him and you can say, I want him. I've scouted him. I want to pay you what I think is his value. But with a football club, you don't know what the value is, because how does anyone walking into Manchester United know specifically what the overheads are, what the wage bill is accurately, what the outgoings are, what the academy generates, what the staff wage bill is, what the debt is, what any unannounced sponsorship details are, when the contracts for existing commercial opportunities expire, what the City of Manchester thinks about any future plans that are not even on paper yet, like an expansion of the stadium, a move to a new stadium. And you just don't know what any investor is thinking right now. Are they going to build a multi-club model? And who's out there in the market? And how quickly is that going to happen? Are they going to develop the training facility, which is getting more and more old-fashioned, especially compared to Manchester City's one? And you will not get an accurate value. And I think people think of these rich sheikhs as just saying, well, here's 8 billion. Thanks very much. We'll work out if that was value when we got in. But what you do is you come in with an estimation, but that's not an offer. And then you do your due diligence, and then you make a pitch, and then you negotiate, and then you do more due diligence, and then you try and get the best possible deal, much like with any other transaction. So the Manchester United process, I think, will move the fastest. of the clubs we've mentioned, but it is still quite early in the process. So we need to wait a month. With Liverpool, I think they're much more split between a full sale and minority investment. And there's not much substance, again, to any bids, any agreements, and Qatar's being mentioned. And we should point out here that a lot of people are asking me about QSI because of the exclusive I broke regarding to Spurs. And I said many times that QSI are not talking to Liverpool. And now people are saying we're wrong because QIAR, Qatar Investment Authority. Well, Qatar Investment Authority and Qatar Sports Investments are not the same thing. But unfortunately, as you find, Wikipedia says they are affiliates, which means that everyone who's a Liverpool fan is going nuts.
Wikipedia, it's true.
It must be true. So basically, nobody is advanced. Everybody is exploratory with Liverpool at the moment as well. I think there'll be some American investors who were part of the Chelsea process who may well return to Liverpool. And I think that Harris Blitzer is one to watch, who have got shares in Crystal Palace. I think that there will be interest from the private sector of Saudi Arabia. So no real conflict with PIF. And I think that if, and it is an if, any Qatari interest emerges, regardless of who it is, it will still kind of be funneled via Nasser Al Khalifi. And this is where there's a grey area because PSG are not interested in Liverpool or Manchester United, and they couldn't with PSG, same for Spurs, have a majority sale. But Al Khalifi is not only PSG, he's the chairman of QSI and a variety of other business interests. So he would know about it. And at the moment, Nasser Al Khalifi doesn't know about any credible yet, and I stress yet, Qatar interest in Liverpool. And then with Spurs, the situation is a bit more complicated because Daniel Levy has not done yet what Manchester United and Liverpool have done. He hasn't put out there openly that he wants to sell. But my understanding is privately, Daniel Levy is interested in at least hearing in a formative and exploratory sense minority investment. Joe Lewis, on the other hand, might be prepared to listen to both, but Daniel Levy wants business as usual. He wants the control of the club. He wants the management of the club, but may be prepared to take on board a strategic investor off the back of the failure of the Super League and the pandemic and a variety of other factors. And this is where QSI are more genuine. They've actually held a very formative discussion with Daniel Levy. Spurs deny that, and we should point that out for balance, but when I broke the exclusive, I knew that Spurs were denying that. I put the Spurs denial in my exclusive, and we still stand by the story that those meetings took place. And you may now see that a wider array of media are on the same page now and all running that same line of, yeah, a meeting took place, but Spurs deny it. But by the way, a meeting took place. And that's usually a telling sign that Levy is perhaps trying to work a bit more secretly. But QSI are not the only ones talking to Spurs, and the stake, should it happen, and again, I must stress it's very early, it is going to be 30% or under. It's not going to be anything in terms of majority ownership or total ownership. So I think that Manchester United is the clearest process and at the moment the fastest process. Liverpool, a lot will depend on if it's a majority sale or if it's minority investment. If it's minority investment, it can happen a lot quicker. So once a credible suitor enters into a period of exclusivity, they might complete the minority investment as quick or quicker than Manchester United. But if Liverpool's a full sale, I think at the moment the expectation is it might take a few months longer than Manchester United. And then Spurs is speculative at the moment. So we shouldn't really mention them in the same breath as Liverpool and Manchester United, because Liverpool and Manchester United have actually publicly put out tender, whereas Tottenham are just taking covert meetings that they're denying.
No, thanks, Ben. That was a really comprehensive answer. I knew it would be a long answer because there's a lot of detail in there. We probably broke a few world records there with the answer as well, by the way. But nice one. And just on Spurs.
Can't ask me about.
I know. I can. I know.
And expect a short answer.
I know. It was a test, though. Also, with Spurs, it's not the first time they've tried to offload a percentage of the club. Back in a few years ago. But anyway, no. Great. Thanks for that answer, Ben. Pete, back to you.
Yeah. Look, there's so many questions out here. Look, Ben, how long have we got you for? We can whip round a few questions, a number of questions.
About 10 minutes.
Yeah, no problem at all. So we can whip round, and I'm looking at the number. I'm thinking we could try and whip round as many as we can, but
we can do a speed round. We can do a speed round.
Yeah, go for it. Okay, so I'll flip one to you, to Jimmy Moore. Good old Jimmy in the chat, as always. Great to have you in there. He's mentioned, question, are Forest really looking at Chris Wood? And is Chris Wood looking at Doctor? I didn't see that bit in the end. Oh my God, Chris. I didn't see
to be fair, that is great. And because it's Jimmy, I'll take that. But that is a great question. Yeah, thanks for put him up again, Daz, and I can hide behind.
I only saw the Chris read in the end. But Ben, question: are Forest really looking at Chris Wood? Because it has been a question today. A lot of people have been saying, "Is it real? Is it not? Is it genuine?" I don't think anybody knows. But from your perspective, what is the situation?
Not to my understanding. I mean, Chris Wood wants to stay at Newcastle, regardless of what the player wants. The club can always force him out, but I think that Wood's in a great position here. He'd love to qualify for the Champions League and be a part of that. He's chipping in with a few goals. Forest are at the moment obviously looking for a little bit more physical presence because of one year's injured, but when he comes back, they've got plenty of different players. Gibbs White is also having a really good season, as is Brennan Johnson as well. So they're different kinds of players to Chris Wood, but Chris Wood joining Nottingham Forest with a 1 year fit isn't necessarily starting games. So is he definitely going to move? Because he wouldn't be an automatic starter. He might fight his way into the team, but there's no guarantees. If he stays at Newcastle, he's also a squad player, but he can finish a lot higher, he can earn a lot more, and he can say he qualified for the Champions League. So there's nothing in this one at the moment, as far as I'm hearing.
No, to be fair, in our loaded chat, I think we thought as much. We put it out there. I think, Chris, you might have put it out there earlier on today in terms of the Chris Wood conversation. I think we were kind of like toying with it. I think Daz was saying, I think if I remember it, Daz was saying, where's the taxi? Where's the car? We'll drive him there.
Yeah, he did.
As quickly as possible. But I think we all thought, the genuine likeliness of that happening, not quite sure about whether Newcastle would want to sell in the window. But yeah, great stuff as always. There's some other questions in there. Question for Ben from Dean from the Geordie Rise. Evening all. Question for Ben: how serious is our interest in both Moukoko and Fresneda? Also, are there any other top young European talents that we are currently looking at as well? Good question from Dean.
Yeah, it's interesting with Youssoufa Moukoko. Newcastle were one of the clubs. Chelsea were very serious as well, but there's controversy over the player's real age, and both Chelsea and Newcastle are waiting on clarification on that. And at the moment, Chelsea have backed away. So there's nothing advanced, and there's a real feeling that he might not be a teenager and could be considerably older. So that scandal is brewing. Newcastle are distancing themselves from it, and we wait and see. I think Fresneda is the interesting one, also an Arsenal target as well, and naturally a position where Newcastle would like a little bit of cover. When you have a young player like that, and Newcastle's entire back line, especially the right back, takes care of itself, you have to be able to persuade the player what their role is, what their pathway is. And given the fact that he's only 18, I think if Newcastle were to move in that area, they perhaps would want to loan him back or somewhere, because otherwise it's quite a hard sell. And it's the same, by the way, at Chelsea with Reece James. They want a right back, but how are you going to persuade a talented right back that has got a big future in the game to come in if your current right back is an automatic starter? And that's where you start maybe looking more for a player that, can play right back, but maybe right back centre back, or maybe right back right midfield, because it allows you to sell a pitch to a player that they're actually going to be involved. If Newcastle were to sign Fresneda, then does he play? Is he involved? Is he just cover? And what's the development to get him from 18 to 21? And then when he's at that age, what's the plan? So what we know is that representatives of Fresneda were actually in London over the weekend talking to a few Premier League clubs. Newcastle are interested, and don't ever be fooled either if something takes place in London, because Liverpool, Newcastle, they do a lot of their business meetings in London to kind of keep under the radar. In fact, Liverpool's recruitment office is in London, their main one, where their senior figures are. So London doesn't only mean Premier League away from Newcastle. So Newcastle are there for sure, and it can't be ruled out. Arsenal are there and Dortmund are there, and to some extent Juventus as well. But I think their interest is cooling a little bit because there might well be a bidding war. So nothing agreed yet. That's the first thing to say. And I know that there were some reports out there that said that Newcastle were kind of front runners, but that's not my understanding. It's quite an open race as things currently stand. And even Tottenham could creep into the conversation as well. And the reason why there's so much interest is because the price tag is going to be relatively low, probably between about 10 and 15 million. So watch this space for sure. Newcastle are certainly interested in a concrete sense and an active sense, but it is going to be a tough transfer for anyone to pull off due to the volume of interest.
Okay. We'll have to wait and see on that one. Obviously, Fresneda we talked about before on the show, and we thought he'd be a great young signing for the club. But to be fair, and I'm sure we'll bring it up, that we've been linked with other players in that position. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of that. Tom Dixon mentions reports in Italy claim Newcastle are interested in signing Roma forward Nicolo Zaniolo. If I'm pronouncing that right, I apologise. The Roma player. Heard anything from that, Ben?
Zaniolo is the correct pronunciation, and I actually used to live next door to him when I was working out for Roma in the Trigoria area, which is on the outskirts of Rome. Great character and a very good footballer as well, who could easily be developed into a versatile player. We know that Eddie Howe likes Zaniolo. We also, by the way, know that Tottenham have been tracking him for a while. And a lot here depends on Jose Mourinho, who, when previous inquiries were made, had intimated in the early part of last summer that the player could leave, and then completely changed his mind. And as a result, Tottenham were not able to pull off a transfer. And now Zaniolo is the type of player that I think could take very well to the Premier League. He has had some horrible injury problems. That's the only thing that we should mention. And in addition to that, the Roma fans have turned against him as well, which is a great shame. He's a very raw player. He's quick, he's direct, and he's to some extent versatile. And I say that very cautiously, because if you actually watch him play, then you will see that he's a winger or attacking midfielder, and that is the versatility. And he doesn't effectively cut inside enough, which is strange for someone that can play attacking midfield or out wide, because naturally he is quite comfortable in central positions. But that transition from central to wide and wide to centre, and that movement off the ball needs improving. But what we know about him is that the technique is flawless. He's got flair, he can finish, and this is why he could be a very good signing. And he was really at his best for Roma in 2019-20, when he played almost 30 games. He scored, I think it was 6 Serie A goals and close to 10 in all competitions. Last season, he was relatively good in European football. I think it was a goal every 2 games. But in Serie A, he wasn't as effective. He lost a bit of his cutting edge. And this season, he just gives the ball away a little bit too much and makes some poor decisions. But make no mistake, under the right manager, huge talent there. So Newcastle like the player. Forest have been linked with him, and Spurs are still there as well. But what's intriguing in all of this, and this is why I say cautious but versatile, is that there's a real feeling amongst those that have looked at him, particularly Antonio Conte, that actually he can be changed into an inverted fullback. And that's where perhaps the interest for Newcastle comes as well, that does he only have to be a winger, or can he play in 3 or 4 different positions? And even though it might seem like a slightly strange comparison because they're different positions to some extent, look at Zinchenko and how effective he is for Arsenal and how valuable he is, because he can play as an inverted fullback. He can go into left midfield, and that ability to transition in game management might save you a substitution. It might provide you with cover during an injury. And that's the thinking with Zaniolo's long-term development, at least as far as Spurs are concerned. So with Newcastle, they are behind their rivals in terms of any previous conversations. When Tottenham played Roma in a friendly a few months back, they discussed it. And fee was the big issue. I think it was 45 or 50 million at that point. Now the fee softened a bit. And I think Mourinho, for the right price, would be happy to let the player leave. But Newcastle, again, would have to move quite quickly. And I think summer is going to be more likely than January. So there's nothing advanced from Newcastle's point of view, but you can understand why he's the kind of profile of player that they're looking at.
Interesting. Definitely. There are so many others.
Pete, can I just get in there for
Go for it.
Yeah, no, I just want to get in there while we're in the Italian market, and it's just a comment that there from Nathan, and I was just checking it out as well. And it's KK, my friend KK. I can't pronounce his name. The Napoli number 77. There, I just double checked it. They're playing a cup match tonight, and he's not even on the bench now. They have rested a few as well, like Osimhen is on the bench as well. But any talk of any movement with him? I know with Mudryk going to Chelsea, Arsenal might be looking for. He's a very similar kind of player. But do you think he'd move in January with Napoli doing so well, or is it a summer move that's more likely for him? I won't even attempt to put Newcastle in the mix because I'd love him to turn up with Newcastle. But any thoughts on him?
No chance whatsoever of any January outgoings of this magnitude at Napoli. Osimhen and, as he's known, Maradona, which is obviously paying homage to Maradona, and that's the kind of name he goes by. They're on fire, and they're working well together. Napoli are flying. Zero chance of any January outgoings from Napoli from either of those two players, and not even guaranteed in the summer as well, because even though clubs are chasing and planning for the summer, the bottom line here is that if Napoli won Serie A and do well in the Champions League, then why would these players leave? And some would say wages, some would say ambition, but Napoli are flying. They're a joy to watch. They're one of the most exciting teams at the moment in European football. And Osimhen is having an absolute ball there. So that's a factor. And I remember we've spoken about this with, say, Bastoni in the past, who was more linked with Tottenham. And Spurs fans couldn't understand why, for the right money, wouldn't he move? But it's just because a player's a human being, and they might like a city, they might like a climate, they might like the team, they might want to win something with their teammates, they might not want to keep moving every 2 or 3 years. So Kvaradona's new and will not be sold, period, this January. And I would say it's still unlikely that he will go anywhere in the summer, but not impossible. And with Osimhen, there's a bit more of a backstory. There's a few more clubs that have looked at him, but it is going to take massive, massive money to lure him away from Napoli. And even then, the player may say, you know what, I'm still pretty happy here. So Manchester United more than Newcastle linked with Osimhen. And I think with Maradona, you've got Arsenal, you've got Manchester City. Often he gets sort of glibly compared to Georgi Kinkladze. And again, this is the level of ready-made elite level marquee signings for big money and big wages that Newcastle may explore if they get Champions League football. But we can't speak definitively about Newcastle's interest at the moment, because even if the player said, I want to join you because you're heading in the right direction, Newcastle in a lot of cases have to find the money. They have to offer a long-term contract to offset that under financial fair play, and they have to pay the wages. And as soon as Newcastle bring in one player, let's say you sign Maradona, and to get him, because of all the other interest, it becomes, I'm just going to pick a ballpark, whether it's realistic or not, £120,000 a week. Then every single player at Newcastle United under £120,000 a week that's done well this season is going to say, we want parity. And that's not blackmail. That's the reality, unfortunately. I can tell you firsthand, when Leicester won the Premier League, of what happens when you succeed. You reward from within, and then anybody coming in expects a wage reflecting where you are as a football club, not where you were. So this is the challenge, that Newcastle qualifying for Champions League is amazing. Everyone would love to see it happen at the football club, of course. But when it happens so fast, you perhaps haven't budgeted for it. which sounds a bizarre thing to say because you get more budget in, but you have to realign everybody who will get a bonus, probably for finishing in the top half, a bonus for qualifying in Europe, then an insane bonus for qualifying for the Champions League. A lot of people will want new contracts and the overall wage bill will rise. And then if Newcastle the next season don't get Champions League football and back it up, then they're stuck with a heavy wage bill that's too high. And this is why they've got to be very cautious in January and even in the summer about setting a precedent of making somebody, it's different if it's Mbappe, but if it's a player like Maradona or even Osimhen, just to give two random examples, then if they end up too high in the package to get them because of other competition and their demands, then you can bet your bottom dollar, if he's not already signed a new deal, that Bruno's asking for the same percentage increase or the same numerical number, because they all know what each other earn, give or take. You can bet your bottom dollar that Callum Wilson, even Chris Wood, are saying we want a bit more money. You can definitely bet that Kieran Trippier and even Sven Botman, being new, will say we need a bit more. And when it all adds up, if you don't back it up the following season, you become in big financial trouble. So herein lies the cautious and sensible and pragmatic approach that Newcastle are taking, but it might mean that they have to exit the race for targets that they might want because they're not prepared to gamble on their finances in the short term. And that is what might change next season. That certainly this was the case at Leicester, speaking from first-hand experience. The fan base forgot where we'd come from, and they forgot that it was a fairy tale, and they forgot that we'd done it out of nowhere, and they forgot that we were going down the previous season before. And it was like, wow, Premier League winners, Champions League winners. Who are we going to buy now to challenge again? Who are we going to buy now to get far in the Champions League? Who are we going to buy now? And then after 2 or 3 seasons when we started to be nearly Champions League, but then not, and then Europa League, and then Europa Conference League, and then mid-table, the fan base starts going, why are we not spending? Why are we not buying? Why are we moving backwards? And it's because they've spent so much money on the infrastructure of the football club, new training facility, stadium redevelopment, new signings on big money, big transfer fees, agents' fees, because they've had to compete. And then as soon as you don't compete at that level, you're saddled with it. And that's what Newcastle have got to be very wary of, which is why I think they are trying, financially speaking, so this is nothing to do with the football side, they're making sure that they walk first rather than run. And that is really quite refreshing because they could just blitz a load of money. They could just spend irresponsibly to try and get short-term gain. But it's very clear that this ownership group won't be, and I suppose I have to be careful how I word this, but they won't be devastated if they don't make Champions League football this season. On the football side and on the ambition side and on the celebration of success side and on how gutted they are for the football team, they will be, of course. But if you only look at it in their game plan and in their strategy and in their financials over 3 to 5 year cycles, all the boring stuff that fans don't actually care about. But if you only look at it from that perspective, this success strategically and financially is kind of coming too soon. So if they get another season to bring in sponsorship, to bring in investment, to do a clear out, to get some youth that's better value that comes through, it might be a silver lining should Champions League qualification not happen. And again, that's not to say, and don't misquote me on this, that I'm saying that they'll be relieved in any way, but purely financially and strategically, the success is coming faster than they expected. And that does actually come with some challenges.
Definitely.
So you're saying, Ben, there's a chance?
He's saying there's a chance. Honestly, Ben, the love for you tonight has been fantastic. Just a few comments in here. I do love when Ben is on. His answers are so comprehensive, and he really knows his stuff. Great guest and great show. And Nathan said Ben Jacobs is great value in one of our spanners, one of our mods, Lisa. haven't been very active in the chat tonight. Just so focused on Ben, amazing knowledge. Our chatters really appreciate. And
the jumper, yeah, great love for the jumper.
I can't find it right now, but there were comments on the jumper, and they asked you the question: could you potentially knit them the same style jumper but in black and white? Because that jumper is becoming very famous right now.
I like that you think I knitted it in the first place. Unfortunately, this is a Zara number that cost me about 60 quid. So unless I put it in the wash with sort of black and white dye, I don't think I have the talents, unfortunately, to knit you a jumper, but it's a nice idea.
Try it.
Look, interesting, just a yes or no question, just before I let you go, because you've been amazing in all your questions tonight. Really appreciate it. Life Goal says, interesting one. Mr. Jacobs, will Vardy retire this summer? Interesting.
Yeah, it is an interesting one. I mean, I've not heard he's got any plans to retire. This actually came up in 2021, and people thought he might go then, and it was a definitive no. And now it's a bit different because he might not want to complete his cycle and drop down a level. So we're going to have to wait and see on this one. He's 36 now, I believe. And you've got Iheanacho there. You've got Daka there. Technically, you've still got Perez there as well. So we'll have to wait and see. I think that Brendan Rodgers was always of the belief with Jamie Vardy that he would be used more sparingly, and if he's effective being used sparingly, then I can personally see him doing one more season after this. But it's touch and go. It wouldn't surprise me if he did say Leicester's my last club, and if he's done at Leicester by the age of 36 this summer. But don't rule out him playing until he's 37, because the pace is actually still there. It's actually the consistency of finishing, which is bizarre, that's disappeared. So I have no inside knowledge on it as to whether he will or won't. It's obviously a question that we ask. And at the moment, the Vardy side, if you like, are quite coy on the situation, which I think is normal midway through a season, because if he has a blinding season, why wouldn't he want to keep on playing? If Leicester were in a better position and fighting for Europe, why wouldn't he want to play in Europe the following season? So how Leicester fare on the field, I think, is significant too. For example, if Leicester go down, does he want to have a final season in the Championship? We wait and see. But no real inside knowledge, unfortunately, on that question at this point.
No, that's fair enough. Look, Ben, it's been fantastic for you joining us. Apologies for those in the chat. We still got like 56 starred questions in the chat. It's been crazy. Some for us, but vast majority for you, Ben. We haven't got through them all, but look, we'd love to have you on, possibly before the end of the window, just to talk some more transfers in Newcastle and other things in general. It's been a real pleasure to have you on, and thank you for taking the time, mate.
Absolute pleasure, and all the best to everyone. And to
Thanks,
Newcastle
Ben.
for the season. We'll speak soon.
Definitely. You take care, Ben. Speak to you
Cheers,
soon.
Ben. Take care.
Bye.
Great to have Ben on. As you
that
guys,
was mad.
As I said, it's just is great knowledge. Like I said, so many comments in the chat, very comprehensive, no doubt. But look, well over 300 watching the show tonight. It's been amazing. If you haven't clicked that like already, click that thumbs up. It only takes a second. It means a lot to us. And click subscribe if you're new to the channel. We're moving on to 6K now, so help us along the way, that's for sure. We had Dan in the chat who supports from the 12th man. He's throwing his support in the chat tonight. So great to have him on as well. Fantastic stuff. So brilliant stuff from everybody really in the chat. You guys, you know what? We say it all the time, Daz, but the people in the chat, the mods, the guys and girls in the chat, they really do drive the show, because there's some amazing questions in there, and you do kind of help that topic of conversation. So
exactly, Pete, and you might have to nip off for a second, but I was going to say, and I was kept entertained with with the comments as well. There was some really funny stuff coming in there, we're not. It wasn't just the. They put Pete on mute here for a second. Yeah, just the comments on Ben's jumper, but it was about just slagging Chris off. I'm going to pick this out because when you guys said he looked like Leslie Nielsen, and Chris had no idea who Leslie Nielsen was. He thought it was Tom Cruise for a second because he was talking about the Top Gun guy. But you said him straight. Naked Gun, not Top Gun, Chris. So yeah, and I think Chris could have actually nipped out now. He's probably gone for a curry or something. You know, Chris, he always dishes us for food. Oh, here he is. Here. Oh, say nothing. I said nothing. He's testing out his broadband again. We'll see if Chris makes it back. But also, I saw something there from Chris off again. I think Life Goals is pulling her leg as well. He makes out that Sean Casey is saying something about Marcus Rashford and signing by the weekend. That can't be true. I don't believe that. Life Goals, you're just making stuff up now at this stage. But yeah, so some great comments in there. With plenty of questions as well that we have to get through. We're going to get through some of them. Let me see. I'll pick one out. You're back, Chris. How's the curry?
I'm back. It was nice, you know. Yeah, it was nice. It was in a place I've never heard of before, but it's like a big chain apparently called Tapaganga or something. Is it Tapaganga? I don't know.
Sorry,
nice.
Chris. I was flagging you off. I said that's why you left, because you went out for more food.
Oh no! Before I went for a curry. That's where I've been tonight. I went for a curry. That's what I thought you were asking me.
And did you find out who Leslie Nielsen was?
Yeah. I was getting mixed up with Bridget Nielsen. Yeah, it was Leslie Nielsen. Yeah, so that's the guy off. I nearly said Top Gun again. Naked Gun. Yeah.
Naked Gun. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Not sure I like that one.
Yeah, and as we're waiting for Pete to come back as well. He's back. He made it back. And yeah, there was another one for you, Chris. Was about, let me see. Chris, are the rumors true that you finished 7th in the X Factor 2011? Perhaps you can sing for us all once we reach Wembley.
I actually replied to David on this one, yeah, because I said to David, back in primary school, I got given the lead part of Herod in a primary school, so like my voice wasn't that bad when I was younger, but yeah, it's gone a bit down the pan now. I mean, you guys know what my singing voice is like based on me, me chants and stuff like that. But
we all know,
yeah. Do you know what? There's nothing stopping me in April if we can find a karaoke bar, bit of Hobson Green, of Hobson and Jerome. I believe I'll do it.
I've only ever done karaoke once, but
let's go for it.
I imagine when we're in Newcastle, I might make it a second.
Why not?
Why not? I've just got a feeling.
We could do it.
First year in college, karaoke was a part of our night out, and every time you got up to do karaoke, you got a free pint of beer or pint of cider. So we were leaving the pub to go to the nightclub with a table full of cider. We were getting that many pints of cider. We couldn't drink them all. It was just too much, and you had a queue to get into the nightclub, so you'd miss out and get into the nightclub. You don't want to do that. That was first year in college. Yeah, let's tackle some of these questions.
I don't know about the more recent questions, Daz. Life goals on Celine Dion. Yeah.
What was the she sung the Titanic song? What was it?
My Heart Will Go On.
Yeah. Maybe I could do that. Maybe I could.
Yes, that was it.
I could drag that out the voice.
Okay. Fine.
Not right now. No chance. But no. To be fair, there's
Chris, can I go to a question for you? Because
go for it.
Yeah. Sorry, and there's a delay on my side, so I am talking over you guys. But Chris, Peter and myself answered this question at the weekend. But just what's your thoughts on if we go with Adidas and the them potentially have been at the Leicester game, the quarterfinal?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, like, I thought, you know what, I didn't think it was going to be such a serious question you were asking me, actually. I was waiting for this whopper question. No, I'd be absolutely delighted with Adidas.
Sorry.
I mean, it's okay. They made some fantastic kits, didn't they? Back in the 90s, and like, I think everyone was gutted when Adidas left, and certainly there'd be an upgrade on Castore, that's for sure. Personally, though, and I know I've told you boys this as well, I'm a big fan of Nike, and I'd love to see Nike come in. But if the rumours are true that, you know, we're linking up again with Adidas, I'd be made up, absolutely made up. You know, they do some nice gears, don't they? So yeah, I'd be all for it. And I do think discussions are going ahead for the new shirt manufacturer, because we can't continue with Castore. There's been too many bad stories. I think the club will be fully aware of it, and who knows, we could be missing out on millions of pounds worth of deals. You know, in terms of, like, you know, orders being sent back and not being able to cope with all the orders. So they'll want to sort that out, I'd imagine.
No, cool, Chris. There was a question I had as well, and I haven't seen it in the chat yet, and maybe it has appeared. But the talks of from there was Keith Downey was quoted as saying that ASM could be sold by Newcastle in January. What's your thoughts on that, lads? And then potentially, wasn't Spurs in the mix? Thoughts there? Pete.
Well, don't come to me first. Go to Chris. Look.
No. Full screen.
No chance. Don't do that. From my perspective, I think it's a load of rubbish. I don't see ASM leaving in January. You know, I think we've spoken privately on our chat. You know, the summer's very different story. Well documented. We've already talked about it. I won't go into too much detail, but yeah, I don't see him leaving in January. He's only just got back fit, as Chris alluded to in our chat, and we talked about it in our review. He played well against Fulham. He made a difference to the team, and when you've got a player like that that's just getting back to fitness, just playing a few more minutes, play 45 minutes, you could see he's making a difference, and you can see he's improving in a Howe system. Why not let him play that through and see if he can become a difference maker and really improve his game? Because if you can get an improved Alan Saint-Maximin, you know, why would you want to sell him? That's my question. So we need to give him the opportunity to play games. He hasn't properly kicked a ball since August, so we need time for him to play football, and we need to give him games, and he needs to get plenty of minutes to prove that he's improved and that he can play in an anyhow team. So a lot still to prove yet, but to get rid of him in January, it seems a little bit premature for me. So from my perspective, I don't believe any of it. I can quite easily believe that Tottenham would want him. Why wouldn't they? But I don't think they could afford him, which sounds really weird, but I think it's the truth. I don't think they could afford Alan Saint-Maximin right now in what we would probably ask for him.
No, that's good. No, I didn't see any further tweets about it. And I didn't realize Keith Downey tweeted saying that was an old quote or anything either. But yeah, no, I can't see us selling in January either, as we lose Chris. More food, starving, and again, and as we said the other night, we look at in the summer, we'll assess how his performance over the course of the season and what we could potentially do that. And I suppose we'll link that maybe to a squad game as well come the end of the season. But Grant, cool. Do you want to pick another question, Pete?
Yeah, there's plenty in here. Let's go for it. Interesting one from Daryl from our Geordies Down South chat. He put this quite early on in the show, actually. He said, when are Bruno and Shelby back, due back from injury? Who would you have as a cover for 5 or 6 months. So he's not even talking about permanent signing, talking about potential loan. So, first and foremost, I think we've already documented about Bruno tonight, maybe 1-2 weeks at the earliest. Shelvey, I think, is back in 6 weeks or 5 weeks. I think Eddie Howard mentioned. So in terms of returning from injury from that point of view. But interestingly, Daz, like if you were to have someone on loan for the remainder of the season as a replacement for these guys, who would you potentially have?
I don't know about on loan. I think we have to buy. I can't see, like, let's say for example the player that we talked about earlier, as in Conor Gallagher. I can't see us getting him on loan. If we're going to get him, we'd have to buy him. And then we're talking about then the likes of who we mentioned already earlier when we were talking to Ben, Ruben Neves, as we would try and look at as an option. And SMS as well is someone that we who we've been linked to as well, but he would have many suitors, I'm sure, as well as Neves would have many suitors. So I think whoever, it would be very difficult to get a good loan player in, unless you're talking from the top La Liga clubs. I can't see there are any Premier League clubs offering us really good players on loan. So I think we have to buy.
A player that we've already
talked
about. A player that we've already talked about tonight. I'll ask you the question again, Daz. So we talked about. I'll just flick him up on the screen now. We talked about Ruben Loftus-Cheek. It's a player that we didn't say that we'd want because he's injury prone and all the rest of it. But would you take someone like him on a 6-month loan where you're not committed to him long term, just to see us through the season as an extra body? Would you take someone like that where you're not committed to pay a permanent signing or a permanent fee? Now, we're just talking. I think, Chris, you've just joined us again. Great question from Daryl. We talked about the Bruno and Shelvey injuries and when they're coming back from, but he's mentioned who would you have as a 5 or 6 month or cover? So we're assuming it's a loan, maybe a loan to buy. I've thrown the question to Daz about Ruben Loftus-Cheek. Daz mentioned the likes of Ruben Neves, Milinkovic-Savic. We struggled to get them on loan. But Daz, I'll ask you the question. Ruben Loftus-Cheek, would you take someone like that on a 6-month loan?
No, I wouldn't. No, I'm going to stick by my decision at the start. I can't go back now and say I take him on loan after I slated him at the start. So I'm going to go say no. I think we'd be better off buying someone, and as well the money that you're going to have to give Chelsea a ball of money to bring him on loan as well. So invest that in a player, and even if that is a young player, to try and even just to throw them in and look at even Foxy, who knows a player, is talking about Andre from Fluminense, who I've never seen play, but someone out there that give them a chance, rather than bringing a Ruben Loftus-Cheek in. I know he can play in the Premier League. He's used to the league. He's used to the country, but I take the gamble on a younger player.
Foxy knows his South American football, doesn't he? He knows everyone in South America.
He does.
You know what? I love it because it's great to have fans that know different sides of football that we don't necessarily. Chris, I'll ask you the same question. On a 5 to 6 months loan, is there any player out there in your mind that you would take on a 5 to 6 month loan, not committed permanently? We mentioned Ruben Loftus-Cheek. I'll even throw in, not that we'd probably get him on a loan, but someone like Scott McTominay. We did talk about him. We did talk about him before you joined us. Scott McTominay. Look, it's different when you're talking about a permanent signing to a 6 month loan. Would you take any of them, or is there anyone else out there that you would take on a 6 month loan that would be realistic?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Pete. I suppose if we're looking purely on a loan and that we have maybe the option to purchase, that for me is different than maybe just bringing in just a loan player and it literally just in to kind of cover the gap or cover the hole, so to speak. But there's not many players that I wouldn't take, if I'm honest. And again, the reason I say this is because if Eddie Howe wants them, then he must believe they're going to serve a purpose. Whereas under the previous regime, with Ashley and the likes of Bruce, it would just be like, oh, he'll do. But with Eddie Howe, I know that he wouldn't potentially bring somebody in who could upset the apple cart, so to speak. It would be a carefully considered deal. So I suppose if you were pushing me for a name, the one that springs to mind is probably Conor Gallagher. He's probably the one. Ruben Loftus-Cheek kind of in the same mold. I don't know what it is about Ruben Loftus-Cheek. He just doesn't. I don't know. I'm not wholly convinced on him. I don't know why that is. I mean, Conor Gallagher, I've warmed up to a bit because I'm looking at our central midfield and I'm thinking, we need someone who's going to come in and do a job. I suppose the biggest thing for me, looking at a loan deal for the next 5 or 6 months, it probably wouldn't be worth bringing in someone who wasn't Premier League experienced. Because if you bring in, somebody, from abroad or something and they don't hit the ground running or they're trying to get used to the country, speaking a different language or stuff like that, they're all considerations. And then before you know it, you're in March, April, and then you're thinking, bloody hell, like he's not really, kind of got comfortable. But if you bring in a Premier League experienced player who can speak English, which is an added bonus, I don't see the harm in that. And really, it's just about looking for either a number 8 or a number 6, somebody who can come in. Because equally, I don't want us to go out and overpay for somebody or bring somebody in who, no disrespect, like a Chris Wood, where in the next 6, 12, 18 months we're going, right, we need to move him on now. We want to bring in like a Bruno or a stopgap person who you go, right, he will do till May, and then we'll, reassess and kind of bring someone in permanently. That's what I'd be doing anyway.
Yeah, no, I think
Chris,
that's more than fair.
A follow-on question there, Chris. What is the room service like there in the hotel?
I don't know. I haven't tried the room service out. Got to be honest, but no, I wouldn't know.
There's one player that I would
take on loan. Coffee.
There's one player I take on loan, and we touched on him on another show. It was on the away days, in fact, when it was linked in the same article that Ruben Neves was linked to. And it's this man, Frank Kessie. Yes. I would take him on loan. And the reason why I would take him on loan is because Frank Kessie, it's very clear that Barcelona want him out. They want him off the wage bill. It's costing them a lot of money right now. Even though they signed him on a free, they signed him on huge wages. I would take him because he would be perfect for our midfield. So if I was going to get anybody on loan, it would be him. But equally, I think you're right, Chris, is that if we're getting someone on loan, that I wouldn't argue about any of those players that you've mentioned. And the reason being is because they wouldn't be necessarily starters, but they'd be players that would come in and do a job for the team. And that would give us numbers and it would give us strength in order to build and potentially get Champions League football. So that's just my opinion. But Frank Kessie is one that actually could come in and start. He would dislodge Sean Longstaff for sure. Like, he is a top player. He's a player that I think we would then go on and sign permanently, or certainly try to. So that's just one that I'd throw out there. But as mentioned, some players, Ruben Neves. We talked about 1 or 2 other players, Conor Gallagher. They're players that Daz is absolutely right. You got to sign them permanently. You got to go permanently to get those players in, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, just in case anyone pulls me up for being, totally agreeing with what Pete said there. I said, we need someone Premier League experience. We need someone who can speak English. And then Pete said Frank Kessie, and I was like, yeah, Frank Kessie, it'd be great. But let's be clear, someone like Frank Kessie, top player. So you couldn't pass up that opportunity. I just meant more in terms of, I don't know, say they found a youngster in the Bundesliga or the French league, and it was like a bit of an unknown. I just wonder whether that would have any value. But if you're bringing in like a top player who has played for the likes of AC Milan and Barcelona, you've got to be interested.
You have to move. You have to move the goalposts for players. You have to. Yeah, it is what it is.
That's a good shout.
Yeah.
So
Napoli are not going to let them go.
not this one from Jimmy.
Oh God, what's this? Check the sheets, Chris. Looks like a few corners have been shot. Oh God.
What, like on the BBC, the FA Cup? Oh my God! If anyone hasn't seen that tonight, those clips, you've missed out because BBC have had an absolute mare live on air. Yeah, the sex noises on the show.
No,
Gary Lineker's presenting, and then Shearer comes on, and it's still going on. Shearer's in the stands doing the commentary, and the noise is still going on. Apparently, a phone has been taped, and Mark, to be fair, put it in our loaded chat. A phone has been taped to the studio somewhere and been designed to go off at a certain time. And those noises, you can't escape the noises. Chris, you'll see it. You'll see the clips everywhere.
Is it that famous noise that Stu Penman keeps sending us all the time? It's gold. It's gold.
It's gold every time. But yeah, it is that noise. And, to be fair, it's funny because Gary Lineker can't help but chuckle. He starts laughing to it because you can't escape it. No. He's live on TV, and the noise is basically drowning his voice out. You can't escape it. But if you haven't seen it, it's brilliant. Absolutely.
Oh, I'll have to look for it later. Do you know what? It's funny that, isn't it? How synonymous that's become. Like whenever anyone hears that noise, whether you're on a train, a bus, or an office, or anything, you could just see people sniggering, going, "Oh, he's opened the wrong video there."
Yeah, he's been done. He's been done.
Yeah.
Love it.
Almost got him.
Right.
Actually, lads, just a quick. The chat has been unreal tonight. I've been roaring laughing. My favorite comment. I know that Jimmy has some classics, but my favorite comment was about to Chris. Was it you that got someone in the headlock and out, and the woman in the headlock? that was the best one for me tonight. I must
admit, I was
trying to keep a straight face when Ben was talking, and I was just imagining that.
Yeah.
Yes, that was a good one too.
That was a good one, yeah, because he follows it up with a very serious question and then just threw that in. So yeah, I like that.
Love it.
Yeah.
I'll be honest though. I have looked into that, and I will. It is something I have considered doing, and it was funny because I was actually laughing to myself thinking about it because I thought, imagine if I went and got that done, didn't tell anyone, and then was off the shows for 3 or 4 months, come back on, and I just had this big afro, and I was just like, boys. It would be good. It would be good.
Hey, Richie could come back like that, yes? You never know.
I know, it could be Richie. Yeah. Richie could come back with a full head of hair.
Yeah. There we go.
Brilliant. Oh. No, there's a few that are agreeing.
Right, one more question, Pete, and one more serious question.
Go for it.
No, okay, let's pick it. I hadn't picked one. Yeah, today it's desperate now.
Or if you want, Daz, do you want to whiz through a few questions?
Yeah, okay. Look, what's your thoughts, Daz? Look,
oh, sorry, Daz. I was just going to say, do you want to whiz through a few questions? And we're only allowed to give one-word answers, and we'll just either yes, no, or whatever.
Yeah, Pete, you go for the questions because my answer, I'll be answering the question before by the time you're answering on the second one. So go for it.
Oh, I love it. Okay. Brilliant stuff. Okay. No, we're not going to go for Isco. There was a question there. Hold on. Let me move through. Some of these. Okay. Hold on a second. What the hell is going on? What are you doing to us, Chris? Man?
Oh,
Are you playing that?
I just had to open that. I'm assuming it was that noise. Was it that
Yes,
We
noise?
it
said
was.
this was going to be a
was.
mixed bag.
Thank you for putting that
I
unloaded.
thought we'd recreate it.
Oh
I
my
thought we'd
god!
recreate it. Yeah.
Oh, you are killing this, man. Right, Tom Dixon says, question, if you were Eddie Howe and you wanted to bring one player back who played for Newcastle, who would it be? Who would you
Hassan
bring
Ben
back?
Arfa.
Hatton Ben Arthur. Okay, great question. Daz, who would you bring back?
My answer is not going to be Ruben off his cheek in case it goes on to the next question. Right, no, for me, the obvious answer is Alan Shearer, but I'm going to go, we'll rule him out. Let's go for Peter Beardsley.
Good one.
Who was that?
Peter Beardsley.
Oh, Beardo. Okay. Life goals. Was Anthony Gordon a lucky miss? He's been dreadful this season. Would you agree? Yes or no? Up or down?
1,000,000%.
Lucky miss. Okay.
Yeah.
That made me laugh. What are your thoughts on Milinkovic-Savic coming in January from Lazio? Obviously, Ben Jacobs mentioned it tonight. Would you take him? Would you pay 60 million for him, which is what's been bandied about? Do you think he's worth it? Yes or no?
Peter Beardsley.
Brilliant stuff. We'll stick with your Peter Beardsley, Daz. That is for sure. Into Trader. Apparently, we're reaching Snowy Wickham as well. Loaded Mag NUFC. So thank you for pushing us out to Snowy Wickham in terms of our reach from the shows that we put on. Thank you very much.
We were in New Zealand before, Pete.
What's
One
that?
of the viewers was watching from New Zealand.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Class.
We have. It'd be interesting to see people in the chat where they're watching from tonight. Just drop it in the chat. Are you local? Are you Newcastle based? Are you based somewhere in the country? Or are you based abroad somewhere? Let us know. That'd be a great one to have a look through to see where we are all from. Alan Thompson puts Chris Hall. Have you stopped giving out Valium to family and Everton fans? As I'm sure if they do get relegated, they will have the best ground in the championship. I don't agree with that. They definitely won't have the best ground in the championship because it's an absolute disgrace. But
oh no, we used to probably refer into the new one getting built.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, if family more talk.
If that's the case, then fair enough. That is definitely okay. There's many more. Are we going to miss out on Diaby? Arsenal have been linked with him today heavily. Do you think we're going to miss out on him, or do you think he'll still be available in the summer, guys? What do you think?
No, I think he's still up for grabs.
Yeah, I know Arsenal are looking at all the alternatives now. When they didn't get Mudryk, so they could look to him. I'd say I could see him still being there in the summer.
Ooh. Okay, interesting. Very interesting. Okay, it was a question for us to myself and Daz before Chris joined, but it can be for all of us, of course. If you could see any Premier League player miss a match versus Newcastle this season, who would you choose? Maybe think about a team that we're going to play in the future. Great question, Life Goals.
Okay, I've got one.
Haaland.
Haaland. Okay. Yeah, we play them. Is it the end of February, beginning of March? I think we play Man City away.
March.
Yeah.
March.
So, Dad said Haaland. Chris, what did you say?
I would also go for City, and I would say Kevin De Bruyne.
Okay. Yeah. Great stuff.
What about you, Pete? What would you say? James Madison?
He'll be missing anyway, by the sounds of it. I would say Salah against Liverpool at St James's. I think without Salah and Van Dijk, I think we comfortably beat Liverpool. That's just my opinion.
He's been missing all season, though, hasn't he?
Yeah, you're right. I think we could win without him being missing. But I think with him missing and Van Dijk missing, it's two of their key players. I think that solidifies our chances of winning the game. And for me, I think that's a bigger game than going to Man City at the Etihad, in my opinion, because I think we owe Liverpool one big time after what they did to us at Anfield in the last minute. And there'd be no better feeling for me than turning them over, not just winning 1-0, but winning 2-3-0, winning comfortably.
Like a Brighton.
Like Brighton. Yeah, exactly. Brighton did at the weekend. There'd be no better feeling for any Newcastle fan to doing that to Liverpool. So for me, Mohamed Salah, loving to be missing. I'd equally throw in there Alisson.
Another one there, Pete.
Go for it, Daz.
Yeah. I was going to say McAllister for Brighton as well would be one good one to miss.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. Not McAllister. Matoma.
Matoma. Yeah, he looks superb.
I tell you what.
He's doing well.
He looks a proper player. He looks a really, really good talent. He absolutely destroyed Trent Alexander-Arnold at the weekend. I was watching the game. Honestly, the amount of times he rinsed him, it was crazy.
Pete, did you see there was a thing going around Twitter? Did you see the video of when Welbeck scored the third goal and Trent was just like looking?
He walks away.
Yeah,
he walks away. So when Welbeck nicks the ball over the defender, there's Welbeck and there's two other Brighton players
just wait
the ball in. Like, it's an absolute disgrace. He sees the player and just thinks, "Fuck it, I don't want that." Like it's bad. Like, and if any Liverpool fan, comes out and tries to defend that, like if that was Trippier, I don't think any of us on the panel would be defending that.
No.
None of us loaded boys would be defending that, and people in the chat wouldn't defend that type of defensive behavior. So the fact that he's done that, and I'll be honest with you, the videos that I've seen put out of that clip, the amount of Liverpool fans that are trying to defend him off the back of that just tells you everything you need to know. Like, you can't defend that type of behavior. You're 2-0 down, you're chasing the game, fair enough, but to neglect your defensive responsibilities just says everything about why people have put question marks about Trent Alexander-Arnold, because he's not defensively minded. And if you're not both, there's a massive question mark. And that's why Trippier has been the best right back in the Premier League this season, by far, because he can do both. He's good at both. I'm really glad you mentioned that, actually. It's a great point. This question was aimed at Ben, but we'll put it out to us. Any chance of us signing Tielemans or Madison this window? Let's focus on Tielemans. I think with Madison still being injured, I don't think it's possible. That's my opinion. I don't think it's likely to happen or even close to being happening, because he's not even proved his fitness yet, let alone being in a position to be sold. So Tielemans, do you think at this moment in time, we're looking at 17th of January, do you think it's possible that we could pry Tielemans away from Newcastle, regardless of what Ben Jacobs has said tonight?
Go on, Daz, you go first, mate.
I think that because it'll take so long to reach my answer. Yeah, I think it's possible, but I do waver between yes and no a lot of the time, because someone else might swoop in. I think we need someone now. So I think we go all out guns blazing to try and get him, and yeah, pay a bit of money to secure him. It's possible. So, but maybe.
I
Chris?
think it's possible we sign him, but I don't think we will. I think it would have been wrapped up before now, unless, of course, like you said, Pete, that they're waiting for a few injuries to kind of return. Could be that. And I also think the problem is the 6 months or less left on his deal. I think he'll be looking at the pound signs and thinking, I can get a really big hefty signing on free if I move in the summer on a free. And I think his wages could also be a problem, because I imagine he's on pretty good wages at Leicester, and I think his next move he'll want much higher wages, and I don't think that we'll offer that. I think we'll offer him competitive wages, whereas he could go to, I don't know, like an Arsenal or a Chelsea or someone like that, and they'll go, oh yeah, we'll give you 300 grand a week, no problem. But we're just not going to do that.
No. I think more so now than maybe 2 months ago, I think Tielemans is seriously considering leaving Leicester in January. I'm not saying he's going to come to Newcastle, but in my opinion, I think he was adamant in going to Arsenal, which was what Ben said tonight. But I think Arsenal, being in the position they are, may well look at, if they win the league or get Champions League, look at other alternatives, a higher caliber of player maybe to come in. And I think, in my opinion, thank you, Roy.
Cheers, Roy. Thank you, mate.
I think
Cheers, Roy.
He might be questioning whether Arsenal are genuinely interested in him, and I think he might be considering that. Whether he comes to Newcastle or not is another thing. He might well go to somewhere in Europe, but I think he wants to stay in the Premier League. And he'll be looking at, will he start for the team that he plays for? In Arsenal's team, would he be guaranteed a start? Maybe not straight away, especially if they build another midfield. They buy one or two other players. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. Not saying he's going to come to Newcastle. I don't know. But I think he'll be seriously considering it, more so than what we thought about 2 or 3 months ago.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely one to watch, in my opinion. I've got 4 questions. Really, some of them are really, really quick ones in general. Life Goal said, great question for all of us, not just me and Daz. It was put out earlier in the chat. Who is your sporting hero outside of football? For me, it's Muhammad Ali, Joe Root, George Foreman, Linford Christie, Ronnie O'Sullivan, and Roger Federer. Boys, who is your sporting heroes outside of football?
I'll nip in on this one because when I saw the question, I had 2 names in mind, and they're the same names that Life Goals has put. So, I've always loved Roger Federer. Loved watching him at Wimbledon. Thought he was just a good, and you know what, just a really nice guy as well, but very humble, but incredibly talented. I always wanted him to win Wimbledon every time I watched the tennis. But my overall favourite one is Ronnie O'Sullivan, because I've never seen somebody so naturally gifted. As in, he plays with his left hand, he plays with his right hand, and anyone who hasn't watched snooker, if you see how quickly he just lines his shots up, it's like he's like an alien. It's unbelievable. So naturally gifted, and obviously, he goes to the same gym as me as well, apparently. So I'm all in for Ronnie O'Sullivan. Yeah, apparently Ronnie O'Sullivan comes to Liverpool quite a lot. So
wow.
Yeah, but yeah, and yeah, quite a character. But yeah, those 2 would be mine: Ronnie O'Sullivan and Roger Federer.
Fair play. Daz, who's your hero? Sporting hero?
Yeah, I don't know where to start really there. I'd have to sit down and think about it. A lot of them might be Irish that you guys wouldn't know. I suppose then you'll have Gaelic football, hurling as well. Which I'll have to think about and come back. Because I don't want to say someone. Yeah, and for me though, football is my main passion. So it's they're all soccer players who played for mainly for Newcastle or even in the Premier League. It's players I admire. But the question is outside of footy, so I'll have to think of that.
What about you, Pete?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the sports that are on that screen right now. For me, from a tennis perspective, Pete Sampras. He's the reason why I started watching tennis. He's the reason why I played tennis for many a year. Loved Pete Sampras and his Sampras Slam. If anyone knows Pete Sampras, you'll know just as he's about to win a major tournament, he'd always pull out the Sampras Slam. And I absolutely love watching him produce that. Brilliant tennis player. For me as well, Usain Bolt, from a sprinting point of view, absolutely brilliant athlete, one of the best ever. For me, Usain Bolt is an absolute legend. If you're looking at cricket, it's out there. Freddie Flintoff, he was the reason why I started watching cricket. I think it was 2005, 2006, when we finally regained the Ashes. Freddie Flintoff was a big reason why I started watching cricket. I'd never watched it before, and when he stopped playing cricket, I haven't watched it since. So yeah, I'd have to throw him in there. So those three for me, 100%. I'd say they were the reasons, and maybe Floyd Mayweather for boxing. Unbelievable boxer. Technically gifted, so intelligent. So yeah, that'd be my sporting heroes from that perspective.
Cool.
Next one, very quickly, would you take Danny Ings on the cheap? I wouldn't personally.
No. What age is he now? I have to check it out.
I think he's 30, 31.
Let me see. He is 30. No.
Not for me.
That comment.
Thanks, Carlos.
Brilliant. Love it.
Some funny comments.
Boyzone.
Right, man. Jimmy's been levering me again. Oh yeah, Boyzone.
Boyzone.
What was the question? Danny Ings. Nah, I think that boat sailed now, hasn't it? Yeah, no, not for me.
Some reports saying Harry Kane might be leaving Spurs in the summer. If they don't get Champions League, he will be leaving, guaranteed. Would you take Harry Kane at Newcastle United? Bearing in mind, we've already got Callum Wilson and Alexander Isak. Would you take Harry Kane? I think he'll be 29, nearly 30 at that point. Would you take Harry Kane?
You know
Good
what?
question.
I'm gonna say no. And don't think I'm saying we're better than Harry Kane. So any other fans of any other clubs who say, "Oh, Newcastle fans to say they don't want Harry Kane," it's not that. It's just I just, especially during the World Cup, I don't know. I feel like he's lost a yard of pace, and I think yes, he's in his peak years. I understand that, and he drops deep, and I don't know whether he's dropping deep because he's trying to hide the fact that he hasn't got that turn of pace or that, that quickness over 1 or 2 yards to kind of, because like I'd say 1, 2, maybe 3 years ago, you'd see Harry Kane, he'd always been around the box and, getting in for headers and nicking the ball in. And you just don't see that from him anymore now. It just seems like he's slowed down a bit. And I'll be honest, to kind of back up my theory, when we talk about players who are like up here, Harry Kane's going to want 300-400 grand a week. Yes, it would be romantic in terms of if he broke the Premier League all-time records and he did it at Newcastle. Yeah, to kind of take over Alan Shearer. But I think it would hold back the likes of Isak and hold back the likes of Wilson, because you'd have to start Harry Kane if he signs him. So.
For me, on Harry Kane, I put this out before. I said, no, don't want Harry Kane at Newcastle. He's going to be too old. He's going to want too much. Even if we got into the Champions League, I don't want him. I want young, hungry players. He's a good player, but no, not for us. Not on the project we're on. Not the right kind of player. And I think at the time I put him into the bracket of. Maybe unfairly put him into the bracket of when the takeover was talked about the first time, and we were linked to Bale, Ronaldo, those kind of players, Messi. I said, no, I don't want to go down that route. I want hungry players.
I'd sign him. I'd take Harry Kane, 100%.
Jordan Mawson makes a great point, Pete. That's a great comment, to be fair.
Would he start Kane over Wilson? He'd 100% start Kane over Wilson. I would take Harry Kane. All right, Harry Kane at 29 years old. It's a great point that Daz made about being hungry. I think Harry Kane moving to whoever he moves to next will be as hungry as anybody in world football, because he wants trophies more than anybody. Like, Harry Kane wants trophies. He's not going to move to a club that isn't wanting to win major trophies. So if he moved to Newcastle, he'd be so hungry to win something in his career.
Yeah, that's true.
He doesn't want to finish his career. He wants to finish his career as a Premier League top goal scorer, which is fine. But he wants to win trophies more than anything. And that'll be a big push. I would sign Harry Kane. I think Harry Kane would go for about 80, 85 million. He's got a year left on his contract. He's clearly not going to sign a new deal. If you were to sign Harry Kane, that would be a massive, massive deal. Would you have to sell Wilson to fund that? Probably, being honest. But being younger than Wilson, being a higher goal scorer than Wilson, you'd probably take that. And I think most Newcastle fans would. So I would take Harry Kane personally. That's just my opinion. But it's a really, really good question. I think Tottenham won't get top 4, and I think Harry Kane will leave. Where he goes, I have no idea. But I think he will go. Cheeky bid for Declan Rice. Forget the other part of the question. Cheeky bid for Declan Rice.
If you mention Rice, Chris will get hungry again.
They're in the moment. They're in the bottom 3. So would you take Declan Rice? How much would you realistically, boys, I want to ask you this, how much you realistically would pay for Declan Rice right now?
Well, there was talk, wasn't there, in his pomp, you know, like when he was flying, there was talk of like 100 million being like the marker. Now, are you saying right this moment, January, or are you saying if West Ham go down?
Yeah, right now, how much would you pay for him? Equally, what would you probably pay for him if they do go down? Because let's face it, they're in a mess right now, and they could quite easily, regardless, go down. I don't know if you listen to the Footballers Football podcast. Brilliant listen. They've just relaunched Wilson and Antonio have relaunched, and Antonio, you know, talked about West Ham quite openly and honestly. Fair play to him. He's talked about potentially leaving the club. He's talked about West Ham and where they are right now. And they are back where they were before, where they were fighting relegation after a couple of years of being at the top. And he openly talks about it. He's really, really honest. It's a great listen. So if you haven't listened to it, give it a listen. But how much would you spend now in January to try and prize him away? But how much would you spend in the summer if they did get relegated?
After we've answered this question, could we touch dead quick on Mikel Antonio, because that's a really interesting point you've just said there, Pete, and I've heard rumours in the last few days. But yeah, to answer your question very quickly, I'd probably say anywhere between 70 and 80 million. I don't think he's up to 100. I'd pay 70, 80 now, and if West Ham get relegated, I think you're probably looking between 50, 60, I think.
Yeah.
For me, imagine the fume. It would be real. But
it is real. Trust me, he is being hammered from pillar to post. Honestly, on the 12-man chat, I've got to say it. Like, to be fair, Dan Lawless takes it like an absolute champ, and he gives it back as well. Arsenal, Tottenham at the weekend, with Tottenham losing, he has given Tobes so much crap. And how somebody that could be sitting in the bottom three gives somebody that's fifth in the league so much crap is unbelievable. But Dan Lawless is an absolute genius for how he deals with the West Ham situation. Yeah, the Tottenham are fifth. Look at where West Ham are. And he, as a West Ham fan, is giving Tobes absolute crap. And to add to that, he is giving Dan Potts crap for the fact that they missed out on Mudryk. They're sitting top of the league. Give him crap for sitting top of the league and missing out on Mudryk. I don't get it. Dan Lawless is an absolute alien of a football fan, but he makes it work, and he's such a great guy. Looking forward to him coming on to away days in the weeks to come. But yeah,
and that's why I have the picture ready as well. We don't always have the picture on standby, but no, I don't think. I think if Declan Rice moves, and if they were to get relegated, I don't think he moves to us. I think he would move to someone like Arsenal. Would that'd be interesting as well. But I'd say he'd stick with the London club. To tell you the truth.
Yeah. Great point. There was a couple.
Oh yeah, Pete. Sorry. So I wanted to ask, why is Mikel Antonio like available for like £5 million? Like, why is that? I know they bought in Scamacca, but why all of a sudden when 18 months ago, like Antonio was like ripping it up? Why has he fell out of favour so badly? Like, have his legs gone or something, or what?
They didn't touch on it. They didn't touch on the technicalities. And to be fair, Callum Wilson was kind of like pressing for an answer on the podcast. Like, and I don't think it was planned, because I think Antonio was a little bit flustered when he was asked the question. But it seems to be that without him confirming it, it seems to be that obviously I think he's 31.
I just checked it. He's 32. He's 33 in March.
Yeah. Wow. So the age is a factor, and I think he's one of the highest paid players at the club.
Well, that makes sense.
And I think those two factors, and Daz, I'm glad you said that, because I thought he was like 31. The fact that he's nearly 33 actually emphasizes the point even more, in that his age, the fact that he's on big wages, and the fact that when he's played this season, he just hasn't scored goals. He hasn't even looked like scoring goals. He doesn't look like the same player he was 2 years ago. And like Callum Wilson's kind of alluding to that fact, but like making it a little bit of banter about it. But actually, there's a lot of realism to it. And I think, and Mikel Antonio, when he's asked the question, would he leave? He was very, very on the fence with it. And I think there's from his response, he's basically waiting for his agent to give him offers for other clubs. I think he's been told he can leave. That's what I read from. That's what I kind of got from listening to the podcast. He's been told he can leave, and it wouldn't surprise me. Put it out there. Wouldn't surprise me if it ends up at his old club, Nottingham Forest. Wouldn't surprise me if it ends up back there. He talks about them so positively, and it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up back at the club by the end of January.
And I hope that doesn't affect Wood's transfer to Notts Forest. That's all I say.
Well, if it means he goes to West Ham, I'm all for it. Take him. 15 million though. 20 if you're feeling desperate.
Yeah, we said the same, didn't we, boys, about Chris Wood today? Like, I don't actively think Eddie Howe or the owners are looking to move him on this window. But if somebody comes in with like 15 million plus, I mean, I'm probably being over the top saying plus, but if someone came in with 15 million pounds or even 10 with add-ons up to 15, I think you'd have to take it. I do. Yeah. I really, really do.
Definitely, boys.
And he's only on a 2.5 year contract.
Yeah. So short-term contract, potential of a deal being done. Look, boys, we could go on all day with these questions. There's some fantastic questions in there, but I don't know if you guys want to sort of wrap up for the show tonight and go to sponsors and know what's going on?
I think we probably should, Pete. Yeah, I'll talk us through it. Yeah, so just shout out to Russ and the radiatorshed.com. We put Chris in jail. Yeah, so go to the radiatorshed.com, who are actually updating their website at the moment, and they are working on the showroom, and we should have pictures of that showroom coming pretty soon. So Russ is going to send us those details. So yeah, and any of your heating radiator needs, contact us at the radiatorshed.com. And also, if you need to get them installed, the Install Works, which is linked to Russ's other company, so check that out. Or if you know someone that needs is building a house or renovating a house, check it out. So further details of that when we get them. That is it for the sponsors. Upcoming shows. We should be back tomorrow with are we still doing that? A fully loaded transfer show tomorrow.
Yeah, it doesn't matter whether we've got a guest or not. We would always produce a fully loaded transfer show in the month of January. So we will be back. Details will come out tomorrow at some point. So keep an eye on Twitter, Instagram, where we post our shows out. We will be back, no doubt, to talk all things transfers, of course, as always.
As always, and we'll delve into the links because we touched on a few of them, but we'll delve deeper into it. So. There's more, yeah. There's always more. And there'll be more tomorrow again. And then on Thursday, Away Days is back, and D from Palace, from the back of the nest.
Yeah, you know what? D, in the last couple of shows, Chris, you will know, he sent a couple of his representatives, a couple of them from America, that have come on to the show for the Palace shows, for Away Days, and they've represented. But D wants to come back to have his say for Away Days. So he'll be back on Thursday. He wants to talk all things Palace and Newcastle. Don't expect all roses and everything being nice. D is controversial. He would tell you he wants Palace to win. He doesn't rate Newcastle, blah, blah, blah. Don't be expecting all good things nice and rosy like we had Emilio and various other fans from other channels, from other clubs. D will tell it exactly how it is, and I wouldn't want it any other way. So great to have D back on Thursday. We're talking all things Crystal Palace and Newcastle, and of course they play Man United at home tomorrow night. So on Thursday we'll have a real proper update with regards to where they're actually as a club and what they're expecting. So be interesting to see what they come out with.
Cool. So that is Thursday. So that shows Wednesday at 7:30 on Wednesday. That's tomorrow, and then Thursday at 7:30 as well for Away Days. Then probably 8:30 on Saturday. We'll go for a reaction show after the game. The game is live on Sky on Saturday evening, so we'll go as soon as possible. Around 8:30. We'll have a reaction show. We'll be posted on Twitter as well. So we're back for that. And also, if anything happens in between, and there's a signing, we will get it out with the show as soon as possible. So keep tuned. Keep an eye on us on Twitter and on Instagram, and make sure you're subscribed and you're liking our shows, and you'll get everything. You won't miss a thing. That's it. We promised a mixed bag at the start of this show, Pete, before as Chris was eating his dinner. We certainly delivered on that, I think, tonight. For once.
We had Dom joining us at the halftime of the FA Youth Cup. Jordan joining us. We had great guesting, Jacob. We had Chris dipping in and out, munching his food. I think our internet was okay, Daz, tonight.
I think, yeah, well, mine dipped at the end, delay, but
in and out. So
pretty okay now.
A very mixed bag, but I tell you what was consistent, and we've said it time and time again. Everyone in the chat, superb question. We've still got 25 we haven't got to tonight. Unbelievable. So keep up your fantastic work in the chat. Come and join us tomorrow for the Full Loaded Transfer Show, and again for Away Days on Thursday. Look, we're loaded. We just keep rolling on with the good stuff, and we will continue to do so. This is what we do.
Pete or Chris, say it. See us out.
How'd you like that?
How you like? Drink it, like weed and tell me you like that.